Right.
Good.
For sure.
I got all kinds of boat questions I give.
Yeah, I was watching some of your videos earlier, and my buddy Ron just bought a Vexus. He bought I think it's a 2020 Vexus, the 21 footer. And I was actually talking to him on the way up about
Ron did?
Yeah. He's getting
really.
Yeah,
you got rid of the Ranger?
Yeah. Well, he's trading it in. He doesn't have the boat in his driveway yet, but he's supposed to be driving down next week and swapping his Ranger out for the Vexus. But he'd watched your 20-foot Vexus review, and he was curious on when the 21 review was going to come out.
Man, so are we live?
Yeah, we're live.
We're rocking and rolling.
So the guy that Steven Johnson is the guy that's got the 21, and Steven had some health issues where he couldn't get in the boat, not COVID, something unrelated. And so he couldn't be in the boat for like 6 weeks. And now we've just not connected. So he's a full-time guide on Toledo. So it's just really hard. At the 2 days we were to connect, it was dead smooth calm. Well, I've already ridden in that boat in dead smooth calm. So it's not very often you're trying to get out on a rough day, but I'm trying to get out in the boat on a rough day to see how it handles. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, yeah, you got to, man. You got to give it a fair shot both ways.
Well, because that boat, I mean, it's going to grade really high, right? It's got tons of amenities. It appears to be really well built. What's going to hurt that boat is the speed. It's a slow boat, and I don't know about the rough water yet. There was something in driving that boat. I was driving it in 3/4. I had 3/4 just 1-footers from coming off my starboard side, and I just touched the trim, and the nose darted down on me, and it was just a really weird thing. And it's got some driving characteristics that I've never seen in a bass boat before. And so as I thought about it, I thought, I just want to make sure I understand that. Now, I've had 2 or 3 guys say to me, no, you're going to find it's not significantly different than driving other boats. But I've tried to be real honest with these boats about, good, bad, and the ugly, and the pretty. And so, the only things that I'm going to ding that boat for that I've seen so far are it's not real fast, and I still don't like the look of it.
You think it's maybe a little heavier in the front or something, maybe? Would make that nose drop a little harder?
Well, so again, now some of this is what I heard from the Vexus folks. And look, I was barely a finance major at University of Arkansas. Okay. So, I'm nobody's real smart guy, but there was something about the way most bass boats come on pad that there's some suction created under the pad. Yep. And I guess the guys, when they were at Ranger, knew this. And when they designed that boat, they changed. There's some, I almost want to say they told me that there's basically a way they figured out to drain that suction out of there. So it planes over real fast and it creates different driving. I'm telling you, it corners. It almost feels like it's hooking when it corners. It'll corner so hard. The boat really, really corners hard, which is great if that's what, if you're running rivers and that's something you got to do. Down here, it's not a big deal, but it just drives different. You just got to get behind the wheel. And, the thing that's most surprised me in this is how many guys buy a boat without really spending any time in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I had a guy reach out to me 3 or 4 weeks ago, and he was looking at buying an 18-foot Phoenix or an 18-foot Nitro, and asked me which one I would buy. And I said, which one rides better? And he said, well, I hadn't been in either one of them. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, I'm trying to buy it this weekend. And I'm like, dude, stop. They don't have them. And I said, well, then if they don't have them, don't buy them. They've got a pro staff guy. Somebody's got one of those boats. Go find one and get in it.
Well, I mean, you would, if you went to the car lot or the truck lot, you wouldn't not test drive the vehicle before you bought it, right?
That's exactly what I said to him. I said, did you test drive your last truck before you bought it? He said, of course. And I said, there you go.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I got a feeling that boat's more expensive than the truck too.
Oh,
yep.
Yeah.
Matter of fact,
look, if you've done this long enough, you've made a bad buying decision at a boat show 9 beers in, right? We've all bought that boat. It's like, oh, why did I buy that? Well, because the payment looked right. So I'm trying to be a little more scientific about it this time around. And, I've been in a Ranger such a long time, and I hadn't been in many other boats, and I just wanted to look at all of them.
Yep. I've got a guy I work with. He bought a Ranger last year. It was a used one. And before he bought that, he was actually talking to a guy. I think it was either Kentucky Lake or Lake of the Ozarks. I don't remember. And he went down there, and the guy lived about 30 minutes from the lake, and he would not let him go run that boat in the lake. He goes, "Oh, I'll put must on it right here and let you run it here in the driveway." And he's like, "No, I want to run it on the water, you know." And that guy would not let him do it. So he walked away from the deal. But
yeah, I would too.
Yeah, that sounds pretty sketchy right there.
Yeah, well, he said, he goes, it was well taken care of. He was a nice boat. He goes, but you know, you get on the water, you never know what happened.
No,
that's right. Yeah, you don't.
I like that. How they mounted the power poles straight to the transom there.
Oh, I did too. Because you know those and I suspect, and so there's some stuff in that boat I think we'll see coming in all boats. You know, guys, they're going to start. They'll change some of how this gets done, but you know those power poles and Raptors, and even a little bit to some degree, not as much, Talons. They're all based on a bushing system. And the more stuff vibrates, the more those bushings are going to wear out. And every time you lever something out further from that boat, in this case, a bracket, you add vibration to it. You add a little bit of weight too, but I suspect there's probably more weight with that aluminum plate inside that, inside the transom that they're connecting those two. But still, it's a cool idea. I mean, I think if all boat manufacturers could make boats starting right now, they probably would do something real similar.
Well, and you kind of, you know, that bracket sticks out and it's got to create a little bit of drag. I don't know.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. I would think so too.
Sure. Especially on the hole shot, I would imagine.
Yeah.
So what are some of the things, in case you guys don't know, and you're on here and you don't know Ken Smith, go check out his stuff. He's been doing the Great Bass Boat Search. I think what you're calling it. Series on his YouTube channel. And he goes out in all the major manufacturers' boats, and it's still an ongoing process, but he's had several boats out, and he just does all the tests, the measurements, the hole shot, all that stuff. But what are some of the things that have stood out in the different manufacturers' boats that you've noticed?
So I think I've looked at either 14 or 15 boats now. And matter of fact, if you saw him, I checked my phone, a guy here in Dallas, Mike LaPointe, just got his ballistic in. And so I'm like, what's the verdict? Because I've never even laid eyes on a ballistic. So I'm really curious to see that boat. But, you know, I've seen, so from the very get-go, Bass Cat, you can take the back lid off and lay it on the back deck. So if you're on the water and you have an issue, you pull your back deck lid off and you can work on your stuff. And the other thing about a Bass Cat I was real impressed with, the batteries are bolted in place. So they're not just those little cheapy nylon straps. They're actually, they're in a system in there so they don't bounce around, which if you know anything about batteries, bouncing them around really hurts their longevity. Mm-hmm. I really like the sea deck and the flooring. I've had a sea deck in the flooring or in the cockpit flooring of my boat. And it's great because you guys know when that carpet gets wet, it'll stay wet for days. Mm-hmm. And it just adds to the weight. It adds to the wear and tear on the boat. So I really like that. The first boat I noticed it in was in the Vexus, but I've now noticed in several boats where they're finishing the interior of the front boxes as opposed to carpeting them. And for me, I don't want carpet in there because if that carpet gets wet, which even if the box is watertight, you open it up in the rain, that carpet gets wet and it takes forever to dry it out. Well, you can dry a fiberglass box out in 10 minutes with a fan. So stuff like that. You know, I've been real specific in measuring because most of these boats have 94 to 98 inch beams on them. But I do a lot of team fishing. So I've been real specific about measuring the boat's width at the front seat hole where normally two guys kind of stand, because my boat's 66, 67 inches, and I didn't want to go a lot smaller than that. A lot of it's layout and preference, where the boxes are, you know, is there net storage? You know, do you guys know Chris Jones up in Arkansas, Oklahoma?
I know the name. I don't know him personally.
So Chris, a great fisherman, just won. He's going to the Classic again this year. He won the Invitational in Muskogee. And he and I were talking about in our Rangers, you know, there's a big touchpad on the front deck. Well, and I'm going to see you two guys smile when I talk about this. Everybody tries to trim their boat up fishing with their foot, right? And he's turned his live wells off a couple of times doing that. Well, there's no sense in having live well controls on the front deck. All there should be up there is trim switches. There's no reason to have anything else up there. Maybe a courtesy light switch. Stuff like that, just real simple stuff. It cuts down on the wiring. It has less stuff to rattle loose up there. I don't like push button pads. I like old toggle switches, which is what Phoenix has gone to, because it's simpler, but it's less stuff to break. Another thing, my Ranger has the flip switch where you can drain the live wells below the gear shifter. Well, everybody's had one of those break. And if it breaks on the morning of a tournament and it breaks with it open, you're screwed. You're not going to be able to fill your live wells up. So Phoenix is one, Bass Cat's one. They actually have plugs that you can plug it up so that even if that happens, you can still fill your live well up during the day. So, some of it's amenities and some of it's just stuff that, the fancier the stuff, the more stuff will break. And I'm not a fan of that because I'm pretty hard on my stuff. I put 100 hours a year on a boat. So,
yeah, it's funny you say that because last year I had that thing, my switch in the back of my boat had with those little rubber pieces, one of them snapped off. Well, I couldn't run because every time I'd run, it'd suck all the water out of it. So my tube wore a swim bait for a little while.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I could do. I mean,
right.
Yeah. Suck the water out of it.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give you another one. Why do we buy $80,000 bass boats with one live well fill pump? Yeah. A couple of these manufacturers have multiple live well. It's a $9 pump. Give me a backup.
Yeah.
So just stuff like that. And the more I've done it, the better I've gotten or the more particular I've gotten. And it's been a fun project so far.
That's cool. You were talking about the switch panels and stuff. I noticed that Falcon's got the old school rocker switches on there, which is kind of nice. Just straightforward. And, like you said, if one goes out and you need to replace them, it's, $20 or something instead of $200 for the whole panel.
Well, $290 for the panel in my Ranger.
$290.
Yeah.
$290.
Go you fish with over at Cedar every once in a while and all that. He's got that Ranger with the touchpad on it. It's went out on twice. He couldn't do anything. I mean, his was dead.
And I'll tell you, if you know anybody who fishes either one of the big tours out of a Ranger, and you can get them to tell you the truth, every one of them carries spares in their boat because they can go to the service trailer and get spares. And because I borrowed them from them, they carry spares in their boat. You just pop them out and pop them back in. Well, you and I can't do that. I mean, I guess we could, but I'm not going to spend $600 to carry a set of spare panels around with me.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I like that. Another thing I liked about that Falcon was, and I think you mentioned that other boats have this, is the rear lid, how it folds up this way, and then as you fold it back, it actually
isn't that cool?
Around the live well, so your fish can't get away as easy.
You got a culling station back there, basically.
Yeah, culling station.
Wow. So along those lines, what do you think about the forward lifting rod box?
The forward lifting rod, I mean, I like it. I've had it. I got a Ranger. I got an old 20 foot. I can't even think. BS20 is what I've got. And I've always wondered why Rangers fold up the other way, but I like it. What do you think about it?
It worried me because then to get in my rods, they stand it straight up and it's got little short gunnels. And I just saw it as a way to flip. You're going to have to keep your rod strapped down to get in that box. Now, granted, you're not going to have to lift it all the way up to get a rod out, but it's going to be a two-hand job. I get everybody trying to do little stuff different. That's just one that I didn't dig. Now, so I've now filmed the last part of that Falcon. I've not posted it yet, but the guy who met me with the TE, he said one of the things he loves about it is he can walk up to his rod box in the garage and get a rod out. And he's right. It's really hard. You got to step over in my boat to get a rod out. He said, you can just lift it and pull a rod out. So there's positives and negatives. And that's kind of back to the Vexus. I don't like the look of it, but I remember when Ranger went from the old 361 body style to the big wider body styles, we used to laugh and call them ski boats. I hated them. Well, now that's the norm. So maybe the norm will be some of this stuff we're seeing as, the rest of the bass boat industry adopts some of this stuff.
Yeah. Here's a quick question for you real quick. Maybe you can answer
it says,
that.
Is the Skeeter FXR and ZXR wider across the front deck than the FX and ZX?
I don't know the answer to that. So I've only focused on 21-foot boats, and I only looked at the Skeeters at the FXR.
Okay.
So, but I bet we could get an answer from somebody pretty quick. And I've got it. Actually, it's on the computer I'm looking at, how wide that FXR is. In every one of these videos, well, not in every one, in every one of the series, I built a grid. And the grid shows length, beam, weight, width at the front. Actually, so any boat that has 2 front seat holes, I measure it width at the back seat hole and then width at the back seat hole on the back deck, which is less important to me, but it's still interesting to know. So I've got that in all those grids, but I didn't look at the ZX. From fishing out of Kevin's ZX, I feel like maybe the ZX is a little bit wider, but I've also learned through this process, a lot of that is in that gunnel height, because those shorter gunnels make that front deck look wider, and they're not always. The bullet, the front deck looked pretty wide, and heck, it was a foot smaller than everybody else.
Yeah. I've actually told Gabe this before in the Ranger boats. That was the one thing I didn't like about Rangers, was that tall edge on the outside. I do a lot of flipping. I'm not a very tall guy.
Some of the older ones, especially.
Yeah. And by the time I get up there, I'm catching my feet right on that. And I like to, on my boat, I've got my foot almost rested on top of that. Where I'm flipping. Like I said, I'm not a tall guy, so if that taller part there, boy, it just kills me, dude.
Yeah, but it keeps your rods in the boat too. If you actually,
And so that's exactly right. Right, there's give and take with all this stuff. You get a limb going down the side of the boat with no gunnel height, it'll rake everything out of the boat on you. So
that's
I've got a little bit, but nothing like what a Ranger's got.
So. Yeah, Ranger's taller. The Phoenix PHX is the one that to me had the perfect gunnel height. It started low and it got taller, and I just looking at it, it really appealed to me as kind of my favorite gunnel height of all the boats that I've looked at so far.
We got Fishing with Dino on here. Says he asked, what was his overall grading on the Phoenix PHX 21 versus the Skeeter FXR 21?
I scored, and I'm working out of memory. So the 2 boats that have scored the highest, sorry about that, were the Camus and the 2 Phoenixes, which all scored real low 80s. And I scored the Skeeter a little lower in the high 70s. And the challenge I had heard about and I experienced with the Skeeter was it will not hold plane at low speed. It wants to porpoise on you. And if you have trailing seas and you've got a boat that wants to porpoise at 18, 20, 22 miles an hour, you're going to drive it through some waves. And I played with it a bunch, messing with the jack plate up and down. And I got it where I could drive it down about 25 without doing that. But everybody else's, you just run the jack plate in the dirt and you can do that at 23, 25 miles an hour. I don't want to be out there experimenting with it in 4-footers and have to drive it through 4 or 5 waves before I get it right. So I dinged that boat on that part of that ride because, that's why I'm looking at 21-foot boats, right? I fish Rayburn and Toledo a lot, and that's as big a water as we get in this part of the country.
Yeah. So what do you grade these boats? We'll dive in a little bit more into this. How do you base the grade? Where do the points come from? And is this just in the mind of Ken Smith? Or
absolutely, 100% in the mind. The algorithm in the mind of Ken Smith is what this is.
Sounds dangerous.
So, I just kind of I talked to a bunch of my buddies before I started this process, and we kind of settled on performance. So performance, how fast is it? How's the whole shot? What's rough water ride like? And then fishability. Is the box layout good? All that kind of stuff. And then fit and finish, which is what I killed my Ranger on. By the way, one of the lowest scores I've given is on my personal boat because I've just had, and some of that's unfair to Ranger because I've had that boat for so long, or 3 years, and I've seen all the problems with it. So fit and finish and 2 more categories. And I just kind of said, okay, 1 to 20. And I was very purposeful when I started this, that I was not going to just scoring. I never intended to give anybody 100. This is not 8th grade in Richardson Independent School District where they grade on a curve.
Right.
Because nobody makes a boat that rides as good as a 22-foot champion did in 4-footers, and will also run 78 miles an hour, and is also really stable to fish out of. You can't get those 3 things in a boat because the hydrodynamics don't let that happen. So in all of these categories, 16, 17, 18s have been really good. And I think 81's been the best score of any boat. And again, I think the Vexus, and I'm not giving anything away, I think the Vexus will score a little bit better unless it really gets crushed on performance. But I'll also tell you, I'm pretty certain I'm not going to buy a Vexus because I don't like the way it looks. And I got, at the end of the day, I got to be excited about buying this next boat. And I wouldn't be about that Vexus right now. Now, having said that, I have been told you can buy that Vexus without the rails. Have y'all seen that anywhere?
No, I haven't.
And somebody said it looks like a completely different boat without those rails. So maybe if I see that, I'll change my mind on that. But for the one I looked at, it's a beautiful boat. And from the inside, I love the boat. From the outside, I didn't dig the boat.
So are you saying it's got the rails on the top of the gunnel?
Yeah. So it's got, you know how Bass Cat has that little rail that lights up? They've got one that arches up off the gunnel on either side, right where the driver and the passenger sit.
Gives the boat almost like an eyeball look. You know, it's kind of like a football look for some reason. It already kind of has that look anyway.
So I haven't looked at any of the Vexus boats until, well, it was probably early last year, I guess. I had seen maybe 1 or 2 pictures of them. That was it. But
yeah, I mean,
they were pretty plain Jane though. They were mostly just the inside showing the drainage system and the live wells and stuff like that. I couldn't see the outside of it too well.
Yeah.
I guess the pop-up cleats. I mean, I would take off that bar and put some pop-up cleats on there instead. I guess is that for just to hold on, to tie off, or I mean, what's
so according to the Vexus people I talked to, which was the regional guy here, he said we just wanted to make a different looking boat. We wanted to stand apart and make a different looking boat. And I have talked to guys who love the look of that boat. I'm just not one of them. You know, I like a more traditional bass boat, which is pretty much what the rest. And truthfully, I love it. A great drinking game would be to turn on Bassmaster Live one day, and every time you can't identify what boat that guy's shooting out of, you got to do a shot. You'd be hammered because you can't tell these boats apart when they're wrapped.
Yeah, yeah, I bet.
I mean,
I see the rail you're talking about.
Yeah, we're looking at the picture of the Vexus. Yeah, it's this.
Wow, yeah, you ain't kidding.
Can you screen share that?
Yeah, sure can.
Yeah, it's got it's a rather large rail. Full size app.
So let's go into here. So there, yeah. So that's the railing you're talking about right there.
So the other things that concern me about this boat is the same as the Phoenix, the same as the Falcon. That Vexus sticker in Texas is going to get scraped up or scraped off. And that big metal thing down the middle, VX21, yes, that's through bolted into the boat. It's going to get scratched up. It's just going, if you fish in timber, you can't have polished metal on the outside of a boat like that. I don't think so. It's pretty.
Or docks. You know, docks will do the same thing.
Docks would destroy that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not going to last long.
But doesn't that boat look a little bit frightening like the white ski boat down there on the bottom right?
It does.
Hey, look, it's the Vexus ski boat.
I'm curious to see what you think. What happens when you take that 21 footer out?
I am too. Yeah, I'm really. And by the way, I don't want to take. So I've driven boats. I mean, I fished my first bass tournament at Mr. R. Bass of Arkansas when I was 15. I lied and told him I was 16. So that was 1977. I've driven everything, but because of the different handling, the way that boat handles differently, I want to ride in that boat in rough water with somebody with a lot of wheel hours on that boat. I don't want it to be driver error. So Phil Addison made a great comment, the guy that I just did the Bass Cat links with. He said, we were talking about the difference between the Era and the Lynx. And he said, actually, the Lynx is a great driving boat. He said, but the extra 6 inches in the Era. He said, but the extra 6 inches in the Lynx let you help fix driver error, right?
Right.
I don't want the Vexus scoring poorly because of my driver error. I want somebody else who knows how to drive that boat. If I could drive it for 12 hours, it would be different. I feel like I could get a real feel for it, but I'm not going to go put 12 hours on somebody's motor just to do that. I'll let them drive it.
Yeah. Ron, my buddy Ron just jumped on here. He's the guy we were speaking about earlier who bought the Vexus and is in the process of getting it to his house. His uncle is a guide up on Mille Lacs and ran Rangers for 20 plus years and had an opportunity to drive the 21-foot Vexus in 4-footers and said it handled pretty good. He was pretty impressed with it. So
I've gotten, and it's interesting, and this is third hand, so you know how rumors in the boat business go, but I have heard that Vexus really wants into that Great Lakes big water market up there, and that's kind of where some of that design came from. And if that's the case, it probably will be a great handling boat. I mean, there's not many boats better to be in big water than in a walleye boat, and that's almost the feel of the depth of that boat, what it had to me. It felt like almost like a walleye boat. And again, back to my comment, you can't make a boat like that be really fast unless you put a 450R on the back of
it. Yeah. And you can't fish tournaments.
Yeah.
Right.
So Terry Gill on here said, didn't Charger and Bass Cat splash a Champion Hall?
Say that again.
He's wanting to know, I guess, about the Charger and Bass Cat. Did they duplicate the hull of the Champion?
So I don't think Charger did, because Charger always made a real similar style hull, and Bass Cat makes a boat which was the very first boat I reviewed, which is the Bass Cat Puma Hybrid. And originally I was told that was a splashed 201 hull, and then I heard from Bass Cat, and they were very specific in that they did not splash that hull, but it has characteristics of the 201. And I'll tell you, from riding in it, it does. It's a good big water boat for a boat that's barely 20 feet, but it's got, if you guys remember in the Champions, because of the narrowness, you get a lot of side slop.
Oh,
that boat's got a lot of side slop, which is just, it's the same thing as in the Bullet, right? When you make a boat that's 94 inches wide or whatever those boats are, you're going to get some side slop in those boats.
Yeah.
Getty Lee wants to know, he asked, what about the Lund Pro V Bass? You have any plans to review that, or have you?
Actually, when I get through this process, I want to do 10 boats. So again, I put a lot of hours on my boat, and I would like to have, and I'm in a unique position to be able to do this. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm no John Cox, but I would like to have a 10 boat to get out on Rayburn and idle stuff and do two things. Number one, keep hours off my big motor. And number two, idle stuff that everybody doesn't know that I'm idling. Because I get a lot of attention on Rayburn these days. And generally speaking, when I find a group of fish, I get to fish on one tournament. And so it'd be kind of fun to be able to sneak out there in a 10 boat. So I'm really interested to do 10 boats next. Matter of fact, I had a conversation with the guy at Sarton Marine this week about the difference between welded and fiberglass, or welded and riveted boats. And so that'll be the next rabbit hole that I go down, I think.
Yeah, we had a question about that. It's great that you brought that up. So you'll be, if you do that, you're going to be targeting the full size, aluminum boats, right?
Well, so that, guys, that's a great question. And so I kind of put it out to my viewers, and I'd love your viewers' feedback on this. I can't decide if I want to do it. I don't want to do it in a 21-foot boat. I want to do it in an 18 to 19-foot boat. Okay. And should I do that with a set size length and a set horsepower, or should I say I want to look at $30,000 metal boats?
Okay, so a price point, or
I don't know. What do y'all think?
Or a length thing? Okay, that's good. I fish, most of my fishing is out of a 16-foot John boat with a 9.9. So I'm familiar with the smaller aluminum boats, and they're great, man. You can get back in some places that a lot of the bigger boats can't get, and they float a lot shallower. And the bigger aluminum boats are the same way. They draft a lot less, and they can get back in there really, really, really shallow in the backs of those creeks and flats and things like that. So that's cool. That'd be a good adventure. I'll definitely be watching that. Guys, if you're new on the channel, or you you're just getting on here, give us a thumbs up. That's a great way to help support the channel. And like I said, if you're new, consider subscribing to the Tin Horse Monty and Backyard Basset, and go check out Ken Smith Fishing too. If you're from our channel, he's got a ton of great content, and we're just now starting to dig into some of this stuff.
Yep. And I've got all of his links down below too in the description.
So I got to ask you, are you leaning, this may be a personal question, you may not be ready to answer this, but are you leaning towards one over the other yet? Or are you still trying to keep it totally open?
You know, so I get that question a lot because I've looked at the vast majority of the boats. So I've not looked at a ballistic. I've not looked at a nitro, which I will. I've not looked at an Allison. And I think once I'm through those, I mean, there's just, you know, there's a couple of specialty boats that you can't find anywhere. And so, and by the way, you know, Heath and his partner have bought Sterling, and they're building a Gambler. And I think they have 2 prototypes on the water right now. I'd love to drive that boat. A team partner of mine had a Gambler, and I really liked that boat. If I had to buy one right now, there's probably 3 that I would be interested in talking to. I would probably be interested, and this still, I think, amazes people, in the Blazer. I was real impressed with the Blazer, and I would not have looked at the Blazer had somebody not said, you really ought to look at this boat. I was really impressed with the Bass Cat Lynx, and I like the Phoenix 921 Pro Elite. Those would probably be the 3 boats right now that if I was really pressed to buy a boat, I would be, and truthfully, some of it would be where I could find the best deal on those boats, because they're all pretty similarly priced boats. I think the Bass Cat's maybe a little bit more expensive.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a dealer? Do you have a dealer in the area for those 3 that you're considering?
So that's the challenge on the Blazer, is the nearest dealer's over 100 miles away. The Bass Cat, the nearest dealer's 22 miles away, and the Phoenix dealer's about 55, 60 miles away. So they're all relatively close. You know, hopefully you don't want to go see the dealer very often, but you know, the worst part of owning a new boat is the first 2 months of owning a new boat. Anything that's going to breaks right then. And so that's the hassle period in those things usually. So
I see you in a Phoenix, man. I'm just being straight up. You just look like you would be back there smiling in a Phoenix. I'm just saying. But it'll be that's cool, man. It's cool to go. How long you been in a Ranger?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I thought
I want to say 10 years, probably, maybe a little longer. I've had 4, I think probably 10 or 12 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, the boat just prior to that was a ZX 250 Skeeter, which was a great fishing boat. My family actually lives in Kilgore. I would love to be in a Skeeter. I was just really disappointed in that boat.
Yeah. So are you going to eBay all your Ranger gear if you make that switch?
Oh, dude, the line is out the door of guys like, you know, we're the same size, and that rain suit you've got, that's a nice Gill rain suit. I can hook you up with that. So yeah.
That's great.
Oh, yeah. Getty Lee said the weakest point of all the boats is their wiring harnesses. So it's seen a lot of people spend a lot of money trying to figure out those issues.
So you want to see something cool, go back to the Vexus videos, and when I crawl up under the dash, there's no wires. They have done such a good job in wiring that boat. It's just, there's some cool stuff about that boat. It's going to grade really well. I just wish I could get over the way it looks to me.
Yeah, looks are important. Gary says he's got a vote for an 18-foot tin with 90 horsepower. So that's one vote for the length and the horsepower way when you do your aluminum boat testing.
So what would that be? A $30,000 boat, you think?
That's probably right there. Yeah, I would think so.
Of course, we all know you can put 4 graphs and an Ultrex on there, and it's a $47,000 boat.
That's true. Yeah, minus the electronics. That's very key.
So, you know, we've talked a lot about that. I've had a lot of comments of guys that said, you know, boat prices are out of control. Well, I got news for you. You know, if you go to Bass Pro Shops, you can buy a ZX21 for something in the 50s, but it's got 2 9-inch graphs on it. If you put 4 Helix 12s on there, or 4 Lowrances, or 4 Garmins, and a 360 and a $3,000 trolling motor, just like that, you added $20,000 to the price of that. And you don't even have a stereo or the little speaker that talks to the fish or all the other little stuff that we still, you could spend $2,000 with TH Marine and nobody would even notice you put that stuff on there.
Yeah.
I got one of the speakers to talk to the fish, but I think it's on the wrong station.
Right. Yeah.
It's on some old AM stations not working anymore, huh?
Makes a lot of noise. I don't think it's the right stuff though.
Yeah, I know you see in a lot of, I can't remember the company that makes that wiring harness for your graphs, but I've been seeing a lot of buzz about that, just getting the proper voltage to your graphs so they're doing what they're supposed to.
Yeah. Interestingly, the guy that I went over and looked at his Falcon this week, he just set up he has a 12-volt lithium battery in his rod box, and he runs his Garmin LiveScope off of it. It's direct wired to the battery in the rod box. And you think about it, the battery, it's tiny. It's about the size of a lawnmower battery, but it's got the power to run that thing. He said he can run it for 4 or 5 days off one charge on that thing. So,
no kidding.
There's a lot to getting clean power to your electronics to really make them perform to the best of their efficiency. And a video I've not done yet that we recorded and we scrapped it because we want to do it again is battery videos. Guys, if you have, and I'm going to get this video out, but I want to have I want to understand the technical part of this. If you are running wet cell batteries and a gel battery, which a lot of us are doing, right? We're running a gel for our cranking battery and wet cell for our trolling motor.
Yeah.
If you don't have a Minn Kota Precision, and I'm not sponsored by Minn Kota, if you don't have a Minn Kota Precision charger, your gel battery will never fully charge. Because your gel battery charges slower than your wet cells, and it will fool that. And the longer you do that, the less charge you'll get on your gel battery. So I didn't know this until the Jones trolling motor guys in Texarkana. He opened my back box and he goes, "What the hell?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You got a gel and 3 wet cells." I'm like, "Yeah, the gels, blah, blah, blah." And he goes, so he told me, he said, my gel battery is a year old. He said he would be surprised, or 2 years old. He said, "I'll be surprised if you're getting a 70% charge on that battery now."
Jeez. Yeah, that's interesting. You don't even think about that.
And he said, "We're even see guys now running gel wet cell lithium." And he goes, "It's totally whacked out to your charge system then." So there's only one. Now there may be another, but the only charger that I know that either can recognize or has a setting where you can tell it what it's charging is that Minn Kota system. I think Power Pole systems may be able to do that now too, because they've got a charge system. But you really need to make sure that if you're running multiple types of batteries, that you got the right kind of charger to do that. And the other thing he told me, which I never realized, he said, if you have, like we've all done, everybody who's watching this right now has done this. We've had a battery go bad, and how many batteries do we buy?
Just one.
We buy one. We go to Walmart or wherever's nearest to where we're fishing, we buy one. He said immediately the other batteries will start leaching off that new battery. And he said, you'll never get optimal performance. He said, just spend the $500-600 and buy all new batteries. He said, you'll be so much better off in the long run. And those other batteries will last longer because you buy all 3 at the same time.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Like a portable charger will have an lead acid switch on it and an AGM switch on it. So that right there tells you that, it's 2 different charge cycles or whatever it does inside that little fancy machine.
Yeah. Ron here had a pretty good question. He wanted to know if you had any info regarding keeping a bigger boat on plane in heavy seas. He said with like the 4-blade props at low speeds.
Yep. So if you talk to the Great Lakes guys who, they run miles and miles and miles and miles where they've got to have that nose control, they'll almost all run a 5-blade. And you lose top end, and by the way, I don't know if y'all have ever noticed it or not, but the more blades on a prop, the less control you have of it in reverse. Next time you're out and you got a 4 or 5 blade, check that out. You have no control in reverse in a 4 or 5 blade. I don't understand why. But For the best nose control, you want to put as much metal in the water as you can. So a 4 blade's better than a 3, and a 5 blade's better than a 4.
Yeah, Andy Leonard has a vote for the Lithium. He says he runs a Lithium on his 9-foot Ray Marine Element kayak. So kayak, yeah. I always forget about
saving weight.
Graphs too.
Yeah,
those Lithiums are.
I'll bet you that guy's kayak with his electronics cost more than my first boat.
I bet you're right.
My first boat that I bought from a buddy of mine who owned a car body place, and he'd taken the boat on trade because the guy couldn't afford to fix his truck. And I paid him $1,500 for a 20-foot Hydra Sport that had no carpet left on it with a 200 Mercury on it. No trolling motor, no electronics, $2,000. I bet that kayak costs more than that with his electronics on it.
I think it does. That lithium battery might cost more than that.
Yes, right. It might.
Yeah, they're proud of those batteries.
They're nice, sure, man.
Have y'all actually touched a lithium battery?
No, I know they're light as a feather though.
So my buddy Dickie got one, or got 3. And I said, I want to see those. Where are they? They're out in the garage. And I walked out in the garage and I looked around and I said, I don't see them anywhere. And he goes, it's up on the shelf. I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, it's up here. And it was above my head on a shelf. And I'm like, how did you get it up there? And he went, it weighs 7 pounds.
7 pounds?
What?
I didn't realize they were that light. Holy cow.
I thought it was like 40, but.
And it's the same size as a regular battery. It weighs 7.2 pounds. And it was just so funny for me. I'm looking on the floor for an 80-pound battery, and it's up on a shelf above my head.
Well, I tell you what, if I take the 3 battery weights out of the back of my Champion and put those in there, that thing's really going to start walking.
So get this. And so I know 2 different guys who have done this. Less than 1 mile per hour difference going to lithium batteries.
Huh.
And the reason is boats are made to carry weight back there. If those batteries were in the front of the boat, it'd make a huge difference. But it just makes no difference in the back end of that boat.
Huh. Oh, damn.
Which begs to answer the question, why don't we drive bass boats sitting next to the motor and just put the whole boat being deck? Seems like it'd be a better ride and be faster. I don't know.
You need to start your own boat manufacturing company.
Trust me, somebody tried to get me to invest in one last year. I'm out.
Have you
I'm
had
not going to own a tackle company, and I'm not going to own a boat company.
Yeah, you only got so much time, you know.
Well, and I don't want to go broke.
Yeah.
Somebody asked. Let me grab this one before I forget about it. Somebody asked about have you had any feedback on your videos from some of the boat manufacturers? You know,
a ton.
I bet you have. I really bet you have.
So I've had some where they said, "Okay, you can't. I want to talk to you off the record." I've actually had quite a bit of that. I've had one be a little bit ugly to me. And then I've had some that I'll give it Blazer. So a week after I graded the Blazer, I got an email from Blazer and said, would you please update? You can now get a parking brake on all Blazer trailers. Bam, just like that. So yeah, they're watching. So there's about, if the numbers that I hear are correct, there's about 11,000 new bass boats sold and registered in the U.S. each year. And my videos have this set of videos, 30 videos, has about 500,000 views. So I think the vast majority of people who are looking to buy a boat in the next couple of years have probably seen one of these videos.
Mm-hmm. Right. Sure.
And the manufacturers have certainly seen them. It's a surprisingly small market. I mean, the biggest boat manufacturer is Nitro, and they only make about 3,100 boats a year. There's just not a ton of bass boats made.
It's hard to imagine after seeing all the ones you see on the water and everything.
Yeah, guys, if you got any more questions about the boats, put them on here because we're gonna pivot over to some other stuff here.
Yeah, 3 Pound Fishing. Actually, he was asking. He said he was looking at getting to a Skeeter at a ZXR 20. He said, "Do you know what the top 2 weaknesses of the boat are?"
I don't, but I loved my ZX 250. That's the older sister of the boat he's talking about there. And my only downside to that boat was some fit and finish issues. This is an absolute true story. I carried a plastic mason jar with a screw-on lid in the rod box. And every other fishing trip, there'd be a screw in the floor. And I'd put it in there and I'd screw it back and I'd put it back in the rod box. And when I'd get home, I would go through the boat and figure out where those screws came from. I had a mess of a time. I think they fixed this. The rub rail wouldn't stay on the boat. Both the screws backed out and the rub rail got longer. So I kept having to cut the rub rail shorter. And it was just maddening fit and finish stuff. As far as a fishing platform, it's a great boat. It's not a terribly fast boat. I mean, compared to some of these other boats, but it's a really comfortable riding boat. And I always felt like I could go anywhere anybody else could go, and a lot of places other people couldn't go in big water in my Skeeter. So again, I really, really wanted to grade the FXR high. There was just things about it I couldn't. But so, by the way, and this is, I probably shouldn't even say this on a public forum, but what I've heard is, so they quit making the ZX 250 and because it's faster than the FXR and cheaper. Now, I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but I believe it is faster because my fishing partner last year, Kevin Laseon in Louisiana, ran an FX 250 and it would get it. It was a fast boat.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
What's the truth now? Because you already said it. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Sure, I'll get a cease and desist letter from Skeeter tomorrow.
Yeah. Getty, you can actually just Google Ken Smith fishing and it'll probably take you right to his YouTube channel. And he's got lots of good stuff on there, man. So
I've been in the insurance business 31 years. And if you Google Ken Smith insurance, nothing pops up. I've been doing YouTube videos for 3 years. You do it with that, and 347 videos pop up. So
it sounds like you're a better content creator than you are insurance salesman.
Apparently so.
Yeah, that was my next question I was going to ask you, is how long you've been doing these videos, and then what are you what's the future of the channel looking like? What's coming up in 2021? You got big plans, or
so you guys know why I started the channel?
No, that was another question.
Have either one of you ever been on Fort Gibson in Oklahoma?
I have not. I've heard of it, never been there.
So a few years ago, the BFL Oklahoma division, they were going to have the regional at Rayburn. So I decided to pop off and go up and fish the Oklahoma division on 5 lakes that I'd only ever seen 4 of them. I had been on Grand, and I almost won Angler of the Year. I finished second that year by 1 point. Just had a great year fishing. But I was on Fort Gibson, and I fished into a pocket, and it was 12, 15 feet deep. And I turned around and I was going to run to the next point. So I was coming back out of the pocket in deeper water and stepped on the hot foot and bam, knocked the complete bottom out of my boat. There was a rock wall there this far into the water. And I kept fishing because, I mean, I finished 4th in that tournament with a huge hole in my boat. Live wells running the whole day. And I got back to the weigh-in, and this is right when I first met Chris Jones, the guy I mentioned earlier. And he looks over and he goes, your bilge pumps are pumping. I said, yeah. I said, that's because I knocked the entire back end out of my boat. He goes, well, how did you do that? And I said, I hit something out in the lake. I said, I was in this pocket and I came out of it. And he goes, yeah, you hit a rock wall. He said, you hit that rock wall in Horse Creek or wherever it was. And I said, yeah. He goes, why did you hit that? I said, I didn't know it was there. He goes, everybody knows it's there. And I said, it ain't on a map. And he goes, well, everybody knows it's there. And so I got back home and I started thinking about how often I saw people running around Rayburn in really, really bad places. And it's because Rayburn's not marked. There's just random big chunks of timber on Rayburn. So I started doing navigational videos on Rayburn. I did 7 or 9 of them and created a video series and just got thousands and thousands and thousands of views. And I thought, well, that was kind of fun. So that's how I started my channel, was doing nav videos on Sam Rayburn.
So it was a public service kind of thing.
And that's what I've said all the way through this. So I'm hated at Rayburn by a small subset of guys because I show people where I fish. And I mean, they're not happy about that. And what I've said all along, so I'm about a 6 handicap golfer. I should be a little better, but I'm not. And I play with the same group of guys all the time. And if you get on the range or you get on the 5th hole and you're really struggling, they'll help you. They'll say, man, you're moving your head, or you're picking up your left foot, or, you know, you're doing this or that. Fishermen, exactly the opposite. They'll let a buddy struggle and you know, take his money. And I come from a culture of sharing. I wanted to share with guys, and that's what I've done. And I've made some people mad about it, but it's funny. They keep watching my videos to see where I'm fishing, and they gripe that I'm showing people where I'm fishing. So
It's amazing how that works, isn't it?
it is, yeah.
Hey, do you know where that rock wall's at now, though?
I don't know the name of the creek, but I could take you right. I could stop the boat within 100 yards of it. Yeah,
Yeah, I bet you could.
$6,000 worth of damage, by the way. Thank you, Fort Gibson. I won 1,000.
Golly,
Yeah.
Jeez. Wow. Yeah, that's an interesting start to the channel, though. That's pretty cool, man. Yeah, I get the same thing. I fish a lot of small local lakes around here. A lot of these lakes are 2,000 acres and stuff, and they don't have they're small. You can cover the lake in a day, basically. But a lot of the videos I do, you know where I'm fishing at, and it's just part of it. Like you just mentioned, it's just about. I like to help people catch more fish, you know, and I'm not the greatest fisherman in the world by any means, but at the same time, I feel like I can show a little bit of something to somebody that's maybe going to be going out on that body of water and hasn't been there. There's people that come down from up north. We live in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, which is about 100 miles south of St. Louis, and most of the fishing that we do is over in southern Illinois.
Okay.
Probably 60 miles away, so just right across the Mississippi River. I live right on the Mississippi River.
Sure.
But the mecca over there is Carbondale, Illinois. It's got a bunch of small lakes. But there's people that come down from Chicago and from northern Missouri. They'll come down in the spring to fish on some of these lakes. And I'll get messages and say, hey, I'm coming down in May. Is there anything? You know, what do I need to bring? What do you think the fishing's going to be like? So I say, well, go back and review last year's videos on those bodies of water, and you know that stuff should be playing. But it's great that people can go to the body of water. They can have some videos to reference and kind of have a little bit of an idea of what to expect when they go out there, instead of just going out there blind.
Right.
And it's give and take. You know, I fish some tournaments over there, so I typically have been hanging on to my videos on that lake until after the tournament. But at the same time, you know, sometimes if I think it's something that is relevant or I need to get out there, it's timely, I'll go ahead and put it out there. And, you know, maybe some people are fishing some of the areas that I fish in the videos, but bottom line is if they're catching fish and they're having a good time, then it's worth it to me. So
yeah, and you know, a lot of my viewers are either not tournament anglers, or I got a lot of young high school fishermen that watch my stuff, and they're always super respectful. I've never to this day had a problem. Now, I did have a guy fish a brush pile that he figured out where I was fishing to catch an 8-pounder in front of me, but oh well, you know, it's his time to catch that 8-pounder. So. If I wanted to be super secret, I would quit doing them. But I'm actually looking forward this year. We're going to fish the North Division of Bass Champs, which is a big team event down here, a circuit up here or down here. And it's going to be fun to get on some different lakes. I find, which you guys probably do too, if I fish the same lakes over and over, you kind of get in a grind, and it's really easy to get in a rabbit hole and not catch fish, especially when, you know, probably the one thing that this has helped me with is I have to look for new stuff all the time. And it's probably made me a better fisherman because of that.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's a good perspective on that for sure.
Yeah. It's like Gary Manor. He said he wanted to know how to catch some fish in Rayburn in February.
Oh, well, if it's this February, you're going to want to bring, probably a 1/2-ounce rattle trap. Nick LeBrun fished the rattle trap tournament, the pro side yesterday. And without practicing, had 26 pounds, had 5 that weighed 26 by himself. So it should be an A-rig bite if the water keeps coming up. But they've been off the A-rig this year. In the years past, we've smoked them this time of year on the A-rig. But I would be throwing a trap. Are y'all familiar with a swank?
No, I'm not. Are you?
So a swank is you know what a coffin lip is?
Sure.
So swank is 6 cents coffin lip bait. bait. Strike King makes one, a couple of other. I think most of them are off the old, was it Megabass? It was another company that made them originally, and there's a bunch of them that have kind of been knocked off or made similar. And it's just a weird, wider wobble than a true square bill. And they eat that a lot starting right about now when the water gets down in the low 50s. So, our water through the end of February will be 50 to 56, 57 degrees. And it's going to be a trap bite. It's going to be an A-rig bite. It's been a pretty good jerkbait bite this year. A lot of it's going to be driven by how much the water comes up. If we keep getting water, we're 2 feet low right now. So most of our grass is pretty shallow. If it keeps coming up, it'll jump to a 3/4 ounce and maybe a little deeper diving crankbait over the grass. But it's going to be a heck of a year. We're going to have we had a couple of great spawns, and it'll be good again this year.
So when does the pre-spawn typically start down there in your area? I mean, I know obviously water can vary, but I think the photo period has as much to do with it as anything. So when does that typically when you start looking for that pre-spawn type bite?
Well, so now, as silly as it is, so we will see spawning. Toledo spawns usually a little bit earlier than Rayburn does, but we'll see fish spawning on Rayburn if there is a really, really early March full moon. We'll see fish spawning on that moon. They'll usually follow the March moon. You'll get a few on a dark moon, but the first full moon in March, you'll see them spawning. If it's a late March moon, you're going to see a ton of them spawning. I haven't even looked this year to see when the full moon is, but and then Toledo is usually a couple of weeks ahead of that for no apparent reason.
So what about the classic is going to Ray Roberts, June 11th, 13th. What any update on that lake? I mean, are they going to kill them up there? Or what's it going to be, a tough bite? Or
it'll be a tough bite.
It can be tough.
Yeah, Roberts can get really tough. The problem is when the fish pull offshore, which they'll be pulled offshore in June. There's but if it's a sand bass tournament, it could be a spectacular tournament. But it's a great place to get 100 bites a day and catch 6 fish, because those sand bass will just wear a Carolina rig out. But there'll be some huge sacks weight. There's giants in Ray Roberts. It just gets hammered. I mean, it's 56 miles from that door right there to Ray Roberts, and I live kind of down into Dallas. The northern Dallas guys can be there in half an hour, and they beat on it pretty hard. So yeah, it's going to be a tough tournament.
So they need to have a little sand bass side pot going, I guess.
Oh, it'd be awesome. Yeah, trash fish side pot. Agreed.
So what about is it Palestine or Palestine? Palestine. The Red Crest is going there. What can you tell us about that?
So Palestine is a south end of the lake is boat docks, mostly boat docks and main lake humps. There's 2 big creeks down there that'll get some play. Big creeks, 3 miles long, not big creeks, but for down there. And then the north end of the lake is made up of 2 rivers. One of them is called Kickapoo, and if there's grass in Kickapoo, it is some of the most fun fishing I've ever experienced. I caught 3 9-pounders there one day on a rattle trap, same day.
Dang.
Yeah, it was stupid fun. And then the other river is a little shallower, but also can be some spectacular fishing. There's a big pond in there that you'll see a lot of those guys going into. My main prediction from Palestine will be that the service trailers will be very busy, because them boys going to tear some stuff up on Palestine.
Mm-hmm.
I've sunk 2 boats in my life, and one of them was on Palestine.
Do they have a map chip for the lake?
They do, but it doesn't matter, because Kickapoo, to get up to Kickapoo, you run that's actually where I knocked a hole in my boat. You run a 15-foot wide power line or cut, a boat lane cut, and then you have to idle around an island. And we illegally tried to cut the timber to make that a straight cut, and went through 3 chainsaw blades before we discovered that you cannot cut a log that's been in the water for 50 years or 40 years. Yeah. Looks like maybe somebody else has tried that over there. And then you go under the power lines and you run another mile, and then you've got a half a mile idle, and it's just those guys don't have the patience to do that. So they're going to run around and they're going to hit stuff, and they're going to whack them. The Palestine will be an absolute. When is that tournament?
That is, I got it written down here. That's going to be February 21st to the 25th.
Oh, they're gone. So Palestine will get high, dirty fast. But if they don't have a ton of water coming in Palestine, it's going to be a slugfest over there.
Okay.
They'll have fun.
So there'll be a lot of guys just jack plate all the way up, trimmed up, and just going for it.
Yep. So we were talking about 10 boats earlier. My old team partner and I, Clay Clevenger, he ran a Gambler, and back then I ran a Skeeter. And to fish Palestine, the lake was down one year. We went and bought a 17-foot boat, put a 50 horse on it with a stick steer and a hot foot. And that's what we fished out of over there. And there's nothing more. If you've never driven a stick steer with a hot foot, it is some kind of fun.
That's weird, man.
Sounds a little ballsy to me.
It was awesome, man. We run by guys.
That's
so
like chewing gum and rubbing your stomach at the same time.
You know, if you've never driven a stick steer, it's very intuitive. I mean, that's, forwards left and backwards right, and you're sitting right there so you can see whatever's in front of you. So it was a ton of fun.
Yeah, I learned to drive one of them when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. My grandpa, we'd always go to Reelfoot Lake in Tennessee, and that lake is full of timber everywhere. Yep. And they had those little like half canoe, half I don't know what they were, just a canoe with a back sawing off, and then they had a tiller. Yeah, and they'd have a tiller motor out the back of it. And it was all stick steer. Yeah. And you just hit a stump every now and then and just take the boat and skip off one way or the other.
That's right. Yeah.
I see some new names on here that are coming in, or some people that just showed up. So I see Rich from Hellabass is on here, White Whale's on here, Shadow Bassin. Got David on here.
Caleb Welch.
Yeah, ask that question. That's a good question there.
He wants to know if you know anything about Lake Patman or Wright Patman.
Wright Patman.
That's where the NPFL is fishing.
Yeah, a little bit. I've never been on Wright Patman. I know they catch some great big ones out of it, but I've never been on Patman. By the way, some of the guys might also be interested. Have y'all talked at all on the show about the study Todd Driscoll's doing over on Toledo Bend?
Let's get into that. That was on my list. That's really interesting stuff.
So Todd Driscoll's Texas Park and Wildlife district biologist, oversees a bunch of East Texas lakes, including Rayburn and Toledo. And he got funding this year. He got funding actually last year to put originally 50, I think, 30 or 50 radio transmitters in tournament-sized fish, 3-pound fish and above. They caught them all out of an area called Housen Basin, which is about 5 miles across and about 10 miles deep. Because Toledo's huge. Toledo's 130,000 acres. And they put transmitters in those fish, and they're going to track them for 2 full years. And so we've done a video series that's in my playlist with Todd talking about what they've discovered so far. So they originally put all the transmitters, they put transmitters in fish last fall as the water was cooling off, and had 100% mortality. Every fish that they did that to died. They're doing the same study on Lake Fork, and they had the same experience. Every fish died. And they had always thought, as we always thought, that fish are most stressed post-spawn when the water's warming up. So they didn't want to put the transmitters in the fish then, not knowing that the fish were apparently equally as stressed when the water's cooling down in the fall. So they waited. They went back over there in May. They've caught a bunch of fish. I think they're currently tracking 16 fish. And basically what they're doing is they catch a fish, they release it, they go over there once a week, they track the fish, they pull up, they find the fish, and then they idle over the top of the fish twice to see if the fish spooks. If the fish doesn't spook, and first they stop to make sure the fish is not in motion. Then they idle over the fish twice to see if the fish spooks. If the fish doesn't spook, they make 5 or 6 casts. I think it's 5 casts at it with a 1/2 ounce weighted worm. If the fish doesn't spook off, then they go right on top of the fish and they drop a drop shot on it 5 times. And so Todd's really, really good, by the way, with Garmin LiveScope.
What color worm?
I don't know the answer to that.
Plum? I'm guessing plum.
Probably something pretty basic, yeah. So they've caught 2 of those fish. And it's in the video. I'm terrible remembering statistics, especially since I make up 85% of them. But in the video, he gives them to me. And I think they had made like 80 presentations to those fish for 2 bites. knowing the fish is right there.
Wow.
They're looking at that fish and they can't make that fish bite.
Wow.
It's been really fascinating. A guy caught an 8-pounder over there on a frog out of what we call gator grass. And that fish lived in less than 3 feet of water all the way until June, when the water was in the mid 80s. And the only reason Todd thinks the fish left is because the water dropped a foot and it pulled out.
So that was a true shallow water bass.
True shallow water bass. And it's just some of the stuff they're seeing. That 8-pounder now lives on a very nondescript mud flat. And all it does is go up and down that flat and sets up on isolated pieces of wood. He said its favorite thing are either big laydowns or spider stumps, which is spot on. I caught a 1031 on Rayburn this summer. I saw it on a 360 imaging on a spider stump on a root ball of a laydown in 15 feet of water on a flat. I was just up there goofing around, saw the laydown, and I was like, wow, look at that laydown. And I'm like, oh, there's a fish. Flipped over there and it went 1031.
Nice.
On camera.
On camera.
On
nice.
camera.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen that, and we're gonna do some more. So far we've been able to track the fish just through the summer and into the fall. So now it's going to be really interesting to see what these fish do when it gets ready to start spawning and where they start setting up. So I'm real excited. I think we're going to learn more from this study than we've ever learned in the history of bass fishing because we only catch 0.1% of the fish in any given acre. And he can now see what those fish are doing when we're not catching them.
Yeah. So backing up to where you talked about the first time they put those trackers in the fish in the fall, right? And they had a 100% mortality rate. And so in the spring, it makes sense. They're coming out of the post spawn. So they've been using up all their energy, to do the spawning thing. So I could see them being stressed and the water's getting warmer. But going into the fall, I mean, you nailed it. You said we all assume that would be a good period because the water's cooling. So is it just got to do with the temperatures transitioning and they're not acclimated to it, or what?
I asked Todd, I said, is there a white paper in this? And he goes, when we understand it, yes. It has flummoxed all the fisheries biologists. There's never been any documentation of something happened like this before, but all the fish at Toledo died, all the fish at Fork died. So then they replicated it in a fish tank where they knew the conditions were perfect. All those fish died.
Wow.
So they know the only constant in all of that was cooling water.
That's very, very interesting.
They developed, and I think it was a bacteria around the wound site, and that's what got all of them. By the way, they found almost all of the transmitters. They found one of the transmitters in an eagle's nest.
So tell us that story. How'd that happen?
The eagle picked up the carcass. They found them scattered up in the woods. So those fish would float to the shore. Raccoon would get them, a fox would get them, coyote would get them, take them up in the woods. And they found their transmitters in the water, in the woods. And they didn't get the one out of the eagle's nest. So what Todd said they did, so it's a directional antenna. And he said they're walking through the woods, and he goes, and they walk right by it, and it gets weak again. So turn around, it goes back. He's like, where is it? It's got to be right here. And Todd said he's standing there while the other guy's doing it, and he looks up and he goes, pointed at that eagle's nest. And he goes,
oh man, he's like, now you go up there and get it.
You go get that. Let's go up there and make a bald eagle mad.
Yeah. I'll get you some of that.
But yeah, that eagle picked up that fish, flown up there and eaten it, and left the transmitter in the nest.
Dang. How much do those transmitters cost?
I didn't ask that. They can't be cheap.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. That's an expensive fish.
Yeah, no, they went to find those transmitters. They wanted all those transmitters back. Matter of fact, all those fish have an external tag on them. And basically it says, if you catch this fish, call this number. And they basically beg people to turn those fish loose. Now, unfortunately at Toledo, there's still a pretty much big catch and eat culture. And so they've asked those guys, if you do that and you harvest that fish, we'll come get the transmitter if you'll tell us where it is.
So have they did any studies on how those fish respond to transducer pings?
So yes and no. basically they're running over it with the big motor. And then when they approach it, the electronics are on. Gosh, I wish I could remember the number. I believe the number is 30% of the fish spook when approached on the big motor. So this was a big topic in some of my videos this summer, and I'll tell you another story why. But
so this is, when you say big motor, you're talking about on idle?
Yes, idling over the fish. They idle over them in a figure eight twice.
Okay.
And so there's a young YouTube guy out of Arkansas who talks about you can idle over all your brush piles before you fish in them. And I'm like, no, you can't. Those fish will leave. And he says, oh, I catch a lot of fish. Well, yeah, you catch a lot of 2 and 3 pound fish because they're the dummies, right? They're the little fish in the group. And he and I didn't get into it. I'm just commenting in my own videos. And as Todd and I talked about it, I said, and by the way, so Todd's an extremely accomplished tournament angler as well. He's won some ABAs. He's won a lot of stuff, as well as being a field biologist. And I said, will you idle over your fish? And he said, no way. This is before he did the study. So after we turned the cameras off, I said, what do you think about idling over your fish now? And he goes, well, if 30% of them leave that I know about, he goes, why would I even take that chance? 1 out of every 3 fish is going to swim away, and I can't catch them afterwards, which tells me I probably put them on alert that I've only had 2 bites out of all the drop attempts on them. He said, I'm not letting those fish know that I'm there. So the other story there's a guy named John Hope who's still around. He doesn't fish much anymore, but he was the first guy in Texas that was allowed to put transmitters in fish. And Dennis Canada caught a 16-2 out of Lake Fork, and they named the fish Missy. And they tracked Missy for 2 or 3 years. They were the only people to ever catch Missy, and they caught her only to replace the battery in her transmitter. And I got to go out and track Missy with them one day. And if you've ever been on Lake Fork, Wolf Creek's a big creek on Lake Fork. Missy lived in a giant cypress tree where the main boat lane that came into Birch or into Wolf dead-ended into another boat lane. And right there, 10 feet off that boat lane is where that fish lived on a point. And so I got in the boat with John, and I said, back then we had a camp at Fork, and I was obsessed with catching a 10-pounder. And he said, well, I'll show you today why you're not going to catch a 10-pounder. He said, you're a tournament fisherman, aren't you? I said, yes, sir. I was young. And he said, okay. So we go in there, and we shut down about 150 yards upwind from where this 16-pound fish is suspended in this tree in 12 feet of water. And we just start letting the wind blow us by. And he's letting me, he's got the headphones, and I'm listening, and he's listening, same thing, directional antenna. And he goes, brrr, he goes, okay, she's in that tree. He said, watch this. And we float right by her. I mean, we float maybe 15 feet by that tree, and we float 150 yards out there. He cranks the big motor. He makes a big semicircle. We get in the exact same spot again. And he said, all right, before we do this, he said, that fish's brain is the size of a pea. He said, but what we have discovered is a black bass, until it's about 6 or 7 years old, is like a white-tailed deer. If a white-tailed deer sees something in the woods that's not supposed to be there, they're real curious. So my family cuts timber, and we would come into the set after cutting timber, and it would be full of deer hoofs because the deer come in to see what the heck you're doing. He said, when a bass gets about 7 pounds, it becomes a tom turkey. He goes, if it sees something in the woods that's not supposed to be there, it's gone. It's not curious. It doesn't care. That's something that can kill me. I'm leaving. So we start floating towards Missy, and I remember thinking I could almost cast to her. Trolling motor's in the up position. And by the way, he had already told us, don't move, don't step. We're all sitting down. We start floating by her, and when we get up, and the trolling motor's up, we get, I'm going to say 100 yards from her, and he turns the front depth finder on, and she swam out of that bush and left.
Dang, interesting.
And I went, okay, what just happened? And he said, she's a tom turkey now. He goes, you cannot catch that fish approaching her. He said, the only way we've caught her is we know where she rests, and we know where she feeds, and we get where she feeds, and we wait on her. And we have a bait in the water where she feeds, and that's the 2 times we've caught her. And by the way, both times they caught her, they were only able to catch her on live bait.
Wow.
So My opinion on turning my electronics. So even today, in a tournament, I will do my very best to have my electronics turned off. If I'm flipping shallow, they're always turned off.
Yep.
Always.
Same here, man. Same here. Hard bottom, shallow grass. They're always off.
We've had that discussion quite a bit.
Yeah.
There's no reason to have it on up in 8 foot or less of water.
Unless you're trying to sell electronics.
Yep.
A lot of guys are like, well, all the pros do it. I'm like, well, all the pros are trying to sell electronics. So yeah, they probably are,
Yeah. They've got it on demo mode, and they've got the transducer turned off.
Catch them on demo mode. Wait a minute, it's not 74 feet of water.
That's right. That's interesting about the when they reach a certain age that their habits completely change. And I can say as humans, we're similar, I mean, when you're young, you're curious about everything. You want to go over there and check, young, dumb, and full of whatever. And you want to go over there and check everything out. And then as you get kind of middle age, you're like, I'm just kind of point A to point B. And if I see something that looks kind of shady, I'm definitely going the other way. So,
well, and I think there's a little bit, y'all remember what the Darwin Awards are?
No.
The Darwin Awards are, the people who get killed incredibly stupid ways every year.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I think there's some of that, because John and I talked about this, and I said, so is it that they get smarter, or is it that only the really smart ones survive to 7 years old? And he said, great question. I don't know the answer to that. And I posed that same question to Todd, and he said, very likely, the fish that don't get caught much are the ones that get to be 10 and 12 and 14 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So there may be some natural selection there.
Yeah, I'd say it's a common. I mean, just right off the top of my head, it's probably a little bit of both. Maybe. I mean, I'm sure there are some that are just naturally spooky and cautious, and then there's some that have been educated by being caught or having boats float over the top of them enough times that they're just smarter. But that's a good question. So what about LiveScope? Do you think it's still a ping, but it's so new and it's a horizontal push of, any thoughts on that?
And so that's funny. So I asked Todd, I said, so how do you feel about this now? He goes, well, I use my LiveScope. And he said, I think it's less obtrusive than being directly over the top of them. And he said, because I think the fish we fish for, that get so many pings from so many different directions. He said, I'm comfortable still using the LiveScope, because I use LiveScope and 360. I'm totally geeked out. And I still use both. Now, again, I don't have to look at fish to catch fish. I know some guys do. If I'm on an area, especially on Rayburn or Toledo, that I know, I'm pretty comfortable throwing at something even though I can't see it. But it's still a crutch. I still like to look up there and see what's going on up there.
Yeah. So are you using the 360 and the LiveScope at the same time, or how do you work with those?
So they both run off 254 kilohertz. So you get some pretty significant interference.
Okay.
So I generally will kind of flip them on and flip them off. So the most common question, you guys probably get the same question, is because guys know I run both. And I mean, I got this question yesterday and I got it again this morning in emails. If you were only going to have one, LiveScope or 360, which one would you have? And the answer is it's different for every single guy. I tell guys. So to me, LiveScope is like watching a TV show in 1954, a live TV show. It's live, but the picture's not great. 360 is like looking at a 10 megapixel picture. It's an unbelievable picture, but it's a second ago or 5 seconds ago. It's always a historical record. And I cannot see how fish react to my bait like I can with LiveScope on a 360. So for me, 360 is a much better finding stuff tool and I never run my 360. I always run it just 180 because I want to see it as big as I can. But I've got a full 180 degree look in front of me to see what's in front of me. But that 20 degree cone on that LiveScope makes it much easier to fish stuff, because I know exactly where that trolling motor is pointed is what I'm looking at. If I'm looking at a brush pile, if I'm looking at a fish, if I'm looking at a rock, I know exactly where to present my bait. And I know I'm much, much more accurate doing that with my LiveScope than I am with my 360.
Mm-hmm. So when you got that 360 on the 180 view, so it sweeps like this, and then does it sweep back across, or does it start back over?
It'll do both ways. Mine will, yeah.
Okay. I was watching, I can't remember what tournament it was. It was late last year, and Polinick was catching. It was the one where Polinick beat Carl Jacobson.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what lake that was on. I want to say it was like Chickamauga or Gunnersville or one of those Tennessee River lakes. But anyway, he was fishing. He was fishing out in this flat, and there were several stumps, individual stumps, and he had the 360 on, and he was talking to the camera guy, and the camera guy came up there and was actually filming. Or it might have been on his YouTube channel. I'm not sure. But anyway, you got a picture of the graph, and he's showing the stumps, and there was a fish in each one of those stumps. There was probably 4, maybe 5 stumps, right, on this flat, and each one had a dot in it.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, now when this thing spins back around, he had it in 360 mode. He said, when it comes back around and sweeps, for some reason, he said, I bet you those fish are gone. And as it swept back around, you saw stump number 1, there was no dot underneath it. Stump number 2, there was no dot underneath it. It was crazy.
Bing, 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 bing.
Yeah, exactly. But it wasn't like the LiveScope where you could actually see that fish leave. There was that delay. It had to come back around before you actually saw that fish was gone. So
I will fall out of the boat this year with the LiveScope. I will. It's just it's so just it's just
mesmerizing.
It's just you'll be fishing along and you realize you don't even know where you are because you're just watching that thing and scanning for fish. It's a crazy tool.
Yeah, Jay wants to know, in addition to LiveScope, do you think the A-rig pressure has changed the habits of the fish?
Gotta believe it has. I do, and I'm probably a lot to do with that because I put a lot of fish in the boat on camera with an A-rig. But yeah, I think they've gotten smarter. And I've got some buddies who fish Hamilton, which is where some of the original gigantic stringers were weighed in Arkansas, and he said it's just really hard to even get a bite on an A-rig anymore. So
yeah, we have a local lake over here. It's a power plant lake, so it gets a lot of pressure in the winter when, especially in the other lakes, get ice on them. And man, there's small windows where the A-rig will work, but they've definitely got condition to it. It's nothing like what it used to be. And it seems like in the fall, like the kind of the early fall when the water's still in like the low 70s, maybe mid 60s, maybe even really high 50s. If you can get on that A-rig bite before people get off their normal summertime stuff, you can catch them pretty good. The bait starts getting to kind of gathering up. It starts kind of slowly migrating. If you can find those bait balls and stuff, that A-rig is really good. But then when it gets more into like traditional A-rig water temps and traditional A-rig season, AKA the winter, they've already seen a bunch of them. You'll see boats out there, the guy in the front's throwing an A-rig, the guy in the back's throwing an A-rig. And then, 200 yards down the bank, you'll see the same thing. You look up on the decks of boats and there's A-rigs, and, good luck catching fish on that. But if you can get on there, if you can get on it early before everybody else is throwing it, you can have some really good days, but they learn pretty quick.
I wish I had LiveScope 3 years ago because I cannot tell you how much I'm watching fish follow my A-rig now.
Oh.
And so I wonder if 3 years ago, those same fish were smoking it or if they were following it and I just didn't know it. But I mean, I see them here comes the A-rig and there's somebody right in behind him, and it's just, they just don't commit to it. So you got to think some of that's conditioning. It looks right, but it doesn't quite look right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that vibration it's putting off. I don't know. I fished a tournament with a guy on Table Rock last year, and he had, it was a LiveScope, deep standing timber deal on Table Rock. And I've talked about this a couple of times, told this story on the channel, but he was targeting spotted bass that were sitting in standing timber out in about 50 foot of water, and the treetops stopped about 20 foot from the surface of the water. But he was throwing that A-rig on his LiveScope, watching it come down and just slow rolling over tops of those trees. But he had like a Flash Mob Junior, something with spinners, 5-arm, and then he had the regular one without spinners. And they would not touch the one with spinners, but he caught probably I don't know, he probably caught like 14 keepers on the A rig with no spinners. So they wanted one over the other. And he says, tomorrow you can come out here and they might want the one with the spinners on it. You just have to have them tied up.
Then I need to cut some spinner. I don't have one without spinners. So
yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to have them both because you never know. You may just think they're not on it and they want the other one.
Well, we've certainly seen that. I know one of the things you want to talk about was rattle beds. The fish at Rayburn and Toledo, of course, Toledo not this year because there's no grass, but they will get so tuned in and off of a color or more specifically a noise, and noise specifically a swank, a snatch versus a trap versus a yozuri versus a lucky craft versus a knocker. There are times that I guess they hear that particular frequency so much, they won't buy it. And you got to switch over to the knocker, or you got to change colors a little bit. Usually for me, colors are more about the fish slapping the bait and not eating it. But the different rattles, the different sounds to them, I really think attract those fish or don't attract those fish based upon conditioning. We've all pond fished, right? Where you go out and you catch 30 fish in a pond on a frog on a Thursday and go back out Friday and get 2 bites. Okay. And I think it's because those fish figured out, oh, that ain't something good to eat.
Yeah, I see that a lot over here. A lot of our lakes have nice juicy grass mats, especially in the fall, and they'll crush it, and then when they start getting that frog pressure, they'll just they'll porpoise it, or they'll blow up behind it. They're reacting to it, but somehow they're not committing to it. And that could be tournament day too, because they won't, that's what they know tournament day. It's like it's always on Saturday, like 90%.
Screw with this guy.
Yeah. I'm real good in the midweek.
Yes.
I've won a lot of practices.
Yes, I'm a great Tuesday fisherman.
That's right. So when you go out right now, you're in rattle trap season right now in your neck of the woods. So do you go out with several rods rigged up with different rattle traps, or how do you approach that?
I'll usually, if I'm going trap fishing, which trap means any rattle baits.
Yeah, lipless crankbaits, I guess I should.
I'll have 5 to 7 pretty much identical rods, reels, setups with different colors and weights. And it will not be uncommon for me to end the day so I don't put wet baits up. I throw them on the floor. It wouldn't be uncommon at the end of the day for there to be 10 baits in the floor that I've gone through. And what I really, my preference is to go where I know there's a group of fish pretty early in my day and figure out what color they want that day. If they don't bite any of them, I know I got a bad day coming, but that's generally where I try to establish, okay, what's my confidence bait for the day? But I'll roll through all of them. And especially if I roll through where I believe there's a group of fish, I'll go back through them, or as I go through them, I'll make 5 casts with one, 5 casts with the next. Just keep working through them.
And you typically will find one that they favor over the other?
Yeah, a lot. The tournament we fished in December at Rayburn, we had 19 and a half pounds on Sunday, and the only 2 baits they consistently bit was a white bleeding shiner 1/2 ounce rattle trap, and the old, and this is hard to find, but there's a different red that Yozuri made in that 5/8 ounce, that little 65 millimeter bait, the Rattle and Vibe. They don't make that color anymore. It's like you guys are down here. That's like you guys are with those pre-Rapala wiggle warts. Whoever bought wiggle warts, the same thing.
Wiggle wart, never heard of that.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's interesting, man.
And I've got a huge box of all these original wiggle warts that have not been out of my garage in 7 years because it's still thrown down here.
Well, you just unleashed something there. You're going to get blown up tomorrow.
Yeah, lock your doors, man. Lock your doors.
I got one that I saw somebody selling on eBay for like $45. It was a color that apparently everybody wants. But
yeah, that's like having a little side investment in an Edward D. Jones account or something.
It's Hollis's college fund. That's what we're leaning on.
There you go, man. It's good to have that. Yeah. So what do you like? What rotation do you get in for your lipless crankbaits? Do you start out with I guess let me phrase that differently. Based on the conditions of the day and the colors, how do you figure those together? How do you sync those up? What do you start out with when it's cloudy versus sunny? You know what I'm getting at?
So generally speaking, if it's sunny on Rayburn, you want to throw chrome. So that's the bait that's going to be on the deck if it's sunny, and especially if it's dead calm. And it makes no sense, right? That would be the bait you wouldn't think would work, but that's it. There is always a form of bleeding shiner on my deck, and there is always a form of a crawfish orange on my deck. If it's cloudy, there's also going to be a gold on the deck. If I've got some watercolor, there's going to be something in a fire tiger on the deck, which is about the only time I throw that, but I do throw it a lot if there's some color to the water. And then from there, it's just kind of all different hues of that stuff. To be real honest, I usually start out with a 6 cents bait because there's nothing better for your sponsors than catching stuff on their baits.
That's right.
But when I went on pro staff with 6 cents, I told Casey, I said, I'm a tournament fisherman. I'm going to throw what they bite. And he goes, no, I totally expect that. So I'll rotate through any of them in a heartbeat. As long as they're biting, I don't care so much what they're biting.
Gotcha. Let's see. I got somebody up here had a question. Find it here.
Sounds like a trap.
It is. I think I found one of the bleeding shiners. I was just going to show it to the crowd, and you can tell me if that is officially what it is. Is that a bleeding shiner?
What brand is that? Is that a Strike King?
That is I think it is.
Yeah.
I think it's a red eye.
That's what I would call a bleeding shiner. Yeah.
It looks like it's bleeding to me. I think I got some on my hands actually.
And you've got the triple grip hooks off of them, so you've got good hooks on them too.
Yeah, this one's been changed out a few times. Got a bunch of stuff here.
Yeah, Jay said I thought there was only 3 colors in Texas: red, red, and red.
Yeah. There's orangish red too. So
orangish red. Okay.
but to his point, they see it over and over and over and over, and sometimes they just get tired of it. Now, I did hear a great story the other day. So Brian Branham was a good friend of mine, a guide on Rayburn. I talked about this in one of my videos, and he said he was fishing in Buck Bay, I think he said. And he said he's on a guide trip. And so Brian doesn't fish most of the time on guide trips. He kind of runs a trolling motor, lets the guys fish. And he said he happened to look down and there was a crawfish on top of the hydrilla, which I never realized they get on top of that hydrilla to eat. They don't stay on the bottom. And he said it was bright orange. And he said he's watching it. And knowing Brian, I'd love to have seen his reaction. And a bass came up to get it. And he said when it did, it went. He said he could hear that tail clipping. He said it sounded just like a rattle trap as it took off away from that bass.
Huh? Like a one knocker or something, maybe?
Yep. He said that's exactly what it sounded like. And I thought,
I've heard. Have you ever been fishing at night and you hear shad come up on top of the water and they make like a little flutter? It sounds like a buzz bait almost.
Like a buzz bait, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So one night I was fishing, I kept hearing that, and I was throwing a top water or something, and I kind of put the two together, and I'm like, that makes sense. That's one of the reasons why they would hit a buzzbait. It's got a similar sound to that, like that fluttering shad or whatever.
We call that the good Lord talking to you.
That's right. Amen, brother. Amen, brother.
Take your headset off and quit listening to music. I'm trying to tell you something over here.
That's right. The fish are talking. You don't need one of them little hydro waves, man. The fish are talking.
I want to pick on somebody, and I don't know him, but one of my buddies years ago was fishing I can't remember. It must have been a Bassmaster or an FLW event with Ish Monroe. And he said they're fishing along, and he's fishing as a co-angler. And Ish has got his headset on, or got his headphones on, and Ish is listening to music and singing. And a 4-pounder comes up right behind Ish and goes and eats. And he said Ish doesn't hear it. He goes, I went 4-pounder. And I thought, dude, you gotta take your headphones off. He's right there telling you to catch me.
So that's a good opportunity. If you're a co-angler, seek a non-endemic sponsor with some sort of like wireless earbuds and just hand them out to your.
Here's your Dr. Dre's. Go for it, man.
Yeah, go for it, buddy. I just wanted to
get marketing on for you.
Yeah, instead of giving you gas money, I just wanted to give you some earbuds.
It's a great idea. I like it.
Have at it. That's awesome.
And so to get into the great psychology, my buddy Dickie Newberry, there is always a seat on his back deck. I just put my butt seat back there. There is always a seat on his back deck. And it's for one reason. I know he's never told me this, but I know what it is. Because if it's there, guys will eventually set down. And that's a little bit less pressure on the fish he's trying to catch because the guy's sitting on that back deck.
That's smart.
Yeah.
I suggested he put an umbrella over it one day, and he wasn't for that. But I thought, give the guy an umbrella too. He'll sit down.
I may just have a seat stuck on my back deck.
Well, I'm thinking he's probably got a pillow and like a nice fleece blanket in the back.
My pillow?
Yeah, my pillow. Exactly on that. So what do you throw? What kind of setup do you throw your rattle baits or your lipless crankbaits and stuff on?
So a lot heavier than most other people do. So I'm almost always a 6.8 to 1 gear ratio reel. I throw it on a Lew's LFS or a Lew's extra wide spool, according to what I'm throwing. So I throw it, if I'm throwing on 15-pound line, I throw it on the smaller spool, the LFS. And I know this is way geeked out, but there's reasons for it. If I'm throwing 20 pounds, and I throw pretty much all in VizX. If I'm throwing 20 pound, I put it on that wide spool because I can put more line on there.
So like the BB1 Pro or the
no, on the 300 series extra wide spool.
Okay, gotcha.
And they're all 6.8 to 1s, and the reason for that is I'm a real big believer in all bait fishing about cadence. And so when I figure out that cadence, that speed they want that bait at, if I break one off, if I need to change colors, I want the same amount of line on the same reel with the same retrieve speed so that I don't have to think about replicating that cadence, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So they're all on one of those two reels. Now, this year, I actually, early in the year, was throwing them on a 7:1 ratio because the grass was so shallow and I was having to move it so fast. But otherwise, it's almost a 6.8 to 1. And then the rod I think I've settled on is the Lew's, and it's a cheap rod. It's a $150 rod. It's called the Magnum Heavy Cover Rod. It's in that black series they came out with this year. Mm-hmm. And it's a 7.6. It's a heavy action rod, but my experiences, so I change all of those baits that I mentioned earlier pretty much come with EWG or extra wide gap, triple grip style hooks. All those come off my baits when they come in, when they get in the boat, those come off. And I put like on a 1/2 ounce or so 70 millimeter, 65 millimeter bait, I'll put a number 3 on the front and a number 4 on the back in a short shank wide gap because I snag a tremendous number of big fish. Matter of fact, my buddy Moonpie caught a 9-pounder last weekend in a tournament that he snagged in the tail. And and I throw it on a big heavy rod, and here's the reason why. If you walk through the woods and there's a vine hanging there that's got thorns on it and you brush up against you, it doesn't stick you. But if that same vine is against the side of a pine tree and you brush up against it, you're going to get stuck. I want to stick you. I want that heavy rod. So when I touch you, I stick you. And I'll tell you right now, I feel real confident in saying there's not a day of rattle trap fishing that I go out on when I don't hook at least one, when I don't catch at least one fish outside the mouth where they have run up and slapped the bait. Mm-hmm. And I don't catch those fish on a limber action rod. It's also easier to work around the grass. It's a lot easier to pop out of the grass because what people don't understand when that don't do it a lot, when that bait hangs in the grass, I'm not trying to jerk it 10 yards. I'm trying to move it that far. I'm trying to pop it out of that grass so it goes, and then it stalls. And when it stalls is when they smoke it. And that's what that stiffer rod allows me to do is just to snap that rod out or snap that bait out of that grass. And it'll come out and then it flutters, and that's when they smack it. And you can't stop it from fluttering. When you pop it, you can't reel that slack up fast enough. But that's when the big ones load up on it almost every time.
So are you when you're working that grass and you're ripping it out of the grass, what rod position do you have? Are you pointing at the bait? Are you typically holding it a little bit to the side?
So I am very right side dominant. So for me, it's about 7 o'clock here.
Okay.
So 7 o'clock being at that angle. So about 7 o'clock, not pointed at the bait, a little bit higher. And I'll tell you, there's a weird deal. I can tell you most of the time when I'm about to get bit once I find that cadence, because it's just a feel. And I also tell you, most of my bites, surprisingly on a trap, come when the line is almost slack line. It's got a little bit of bow in it. I'm working it that slow. It's not really cooking that bait. And that, I talk about this a lot in some of my videos. The biggest mistake I see guys make, not just in rattle bait fishing, but in every kind of fishing, is they're working the bait fast because they don't want to get hung up. And you got to be connecting with that cover most of the time, especially in these highly pressured lakes, to get that reaction bite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little more work, but it's kind of like, well, it's different, but in the same sense, pitching a jig or a Texas rig bait deep in the thickest stuff, back in the meat. A lot of people won't do that because, or trying to skip a jig all the way in the back underneath the slip or something.
Yeah.
Those fish on the outside, those fish on the outside perimeter, or the fish that are sitting up high in the grass, have seen all those baits come over them, or they've seen the baits come by. But you get that thing down in the grass and rip it out. You're making those fish that are maybe sitting down there a little bit deeper come up and react to it. So when you're fishing, you said you fish 15 and 20 pound tests, fluorocarbon. The 15, I'm assuming, is for out deeper, and the 20 is for up shallower.
Yeah. And I would prefer throwing 15 all the time because the bait rattles better. But yeah, that's exactly right. It's depth. By the way, great point. So one of the fish Todd's tracking is a 6-pounder. It's the only fish he's caught a second time. And it lives on the steps in the back of a boat dock that he said, I can't see the fish on LiveScope because it's so far back under this stuff. And he said, I had to skip a bait to get it back there to that fish. And he said, and I firmly believe I caught that fish because nobody else is showing that fish a bait.
Mm-hmm. We had Matt Pangrack was on here a couple of weeks ago. I think last week. He's from Bass Talk Live, him and Mark Jeffries. And we were talking about drones and how in the future we can see them implementing like underwater drones, like submarine type drones, and the applications for a tournament angler or weekend warrior. And one of the things I mentioned, the two things that I mentioned was I'd like to have a sub drone that could swim up underneath grass mats and eliminate that 1,000 yards of dead grass and just enable you to find that 20-yard sweet spot that's got that big school sitting in it. And the other one was to go back underneath those docks all the way to the walkways and see if there's anything back there, so you don't have to troll all the way to the back of that dock and waste all that time. And it was funny, just we were just talking about how far are things going to go in fishing. And there's actually a manufacturer out there that makes a drone used for whatever purposes you want to do, but it's like an underwater submarine type drone. So.
I wonder. So I look at my LiveScope and I look at my 360 that I can buy for $3,000. What technology is on a $300 million nuclear submarine right now?
Jeez. Yeah, because this is old technology.
Oh my God, this technology, who knows how long the Navy's had this technology.
Yeah.
So you got to wonder what's out there that we just don't know about yet.
I don't know.
At what point is it not fishing anymore, though?
I'll be fine if we start calling it catching. What'd you do? I went catching today. I'm fine with that.
So Winning Edge had this question a little bit ago, and I was actually going to ask it. We kind of got into some other stuff, but he said, do you see the traditional weigh-ins going away in the future?
No.
Because of the pressure on the fish and everything else.
No, I don't. Excuse me, I got to answer something real quick.
Sure, no problem. Kenneth Dennis on here. He was asking about when will Ken decide to buy a boat, and we talked about that. If you didn't hear us kind of talking about that and what boat he's leaning towards, go back and check out the playback because we got into the boat details at the very beginning of this. So he's got a couple that he's looking at, and I'm sure he's going to wait until he analyzes these next.
Yes, it's an elephant. Oh my God,
it's a big mystery.
So no, I don't think we'll move away from traditional. And actually, I think you're going to find Major League Fishing going back to traditional weigh-ins. And I think it's because that's what sponsors want.
Yeah.
They don't want us. They want to be seen. They want us there. So we signed a really big deal down here this year with a non-endemic company called Spark Energy, and they want guys at the weigh-ins. They want a crowd. They want to be able to show people their products. There's a reason. Lew's and Daiwa have booths set up at weigh-ins because people walk in there and see their products. And I see it reversing. I see it going back the other way.
Yeah, I can see that. That's one of the things that I dislike about the Major League Fishing is, and I'm sure the tournament anglers don't like it, hate it even more, is not having that crowd interaction, being able to, there's nothing better than just bringing fish across the stage, and on that platform with that big of an audience, it's got to be something that you miss. People going from the Bassmaster Elites to the MLF. It's such a, I don't know. It's a lot more private. It seems like the MLF deal where you're weighing in out in the water. It just seems like it's kind of a made for TV thing. I think it's really cool. Don't get me wrong, but back to where what you were saying, I think that crowd interaction and the sponsors is the deal. I think there's tons of evidence, some of it written about and some of it talked about, that the Major League Fishing guys have struggled with sponsorship. Some of them have been real outspoken about it. One in particular, and then a lot of them have talked privately, and I've been in some of those conversations because their sponsors just don't feel like they're getting the bang for the buck without those guys. And let's face it, I mean, there's some great fishermen that just disappeared from the planet with Major League Fishing. We haven't seen them on TV in forever. And I don't understand why that is. I don't know if it's what boat they fish out of, or maybe they just had a bad year or two. But I really do think we'll see at some point Major League Fishing moving back to a traditional way. Yeah, I agree. Rich was just saying he thinks it's gonna slowly trend back that way. Shadow Bassin says I think I don't know if you can read that or not, but that's kind of like the Texas, right? And I got a question before I forget. I was watching. I think it was the video where you were in the Falcon, but you were wearing a Toyota buff around your neck. So I was going to ask you, have you fished the Toyota Owners Tournament? Because I have that same buff.
No, but I am real particular about what I wear. I'll only wear stuff that somebody gives me for free and don't pay me for. So that was a giveaway somewhere along the lines. And I'm like, oh, free buff, put it on, wear it in front of 100,000 people next year. So no, I have not.
That may be where that came from, because I've got one and I've been to the Toyota Owners Tournament a couple of times. So I saw that. And
they've got a great affinity program.
Yeah, it's fun. So, hey, before we get off here, that Spark thing, you kind of brought that up. I was watching.
Cheers, guys.
Yeah, round two. Talk a little bit about that Spark program.
Your new sponsor.
The incentive program that they got.
So in Texas, we can pick who our energy is provided by in most of the states. So there's only like 9 states that you can do that. And so in Texas, you can pick from TXU Energy or NRG, who are the guys who sponsor where the Texas football team plays, or all these other companies. And so there was a young man in Houston watching my videos, a high school fisherman, and his dad kind of wandered through and said, "What are you watching?" He goes, "I'm watching this Ken Smith guy." And he goes, "Oh, okay." So he stood there and watched it for a few minutes. And this guy happened to be the CFO of Spark Energy. And he reached out to me, and I ignored it because I thought it was one of those, your great uncle in Nigeria needs to move $100 million. Can we please get your banking? I literally did. I ignored it for a couple of days. And then I looked at the email again, and I thought, well, that looks like a real company. So I looked him up on LinkedIn, and I'm like, oh crap, that is a real company. So I called him, and he said, we would like to create an affinity program. Or actually, it's not what he said. He said, how can we get Texas fishermen interested in being our customers? And so we started talking about affinity programs, about what, Ranger Cup is, what Bass Cat Quest is, what Triton Gold is. And he said, we could do something like that. So basically what they did was they've given us, for Bass Champs tournament circuit down here, they gave us $2,000 per tournament, and we give it away to the top 10 finisher. That's the highest top 10 finisher who's a Spark customer. And we gave away $2,000 at Falcon this weekend to the guys who finished sixth, and they won more than the guys who finished third. They won $27.50 for finishing sixth. And then what he said was, he said, I want to make sure this money gets won. So if it's not won, because they only have 1% of all the population of Texas as customers. So in the first tournament, we think we had 3 guys competing for it in the East Division, and nobody won it. So we rolled it to the next tournament. So it's now $4,000, and it'll keep rolling like that. And then they gave us another $5,000 for the championship. So they gave us $37,000 for Bass Champs. And then they gave me $250 a week to give away on my channel. So we're going to do a drawing every week on my channel. Guys just have to go to the Spark website and register. And you just give them your name and email address. And we're going to do 3 giveaways each month for Spark customers and 1 giveaway for everybody else. Because, I mean, you know, if you live in Missouri, you can't be a Spark customer, but they wanted to give back to the community. And
I already looked. I looked just in case, but I couldn't.
Yeah. And, you know, so this is one of those deals where this came from a video where I kind of beat up on BASS and FLW. He saw a video that I had done about how poor the paybacks were. And this is where, as fishermen, if we want to show non-endemic companies that will buy their stuff if they'll support us, now's the time to show them. Because these guys threw, and oh, by the way, they also gave us for ShareLunker down here. So Texas Park and Wildlife does ShareLunker. So if you catch an 8+ pound fish and it's accepted to ShareLunker, they'll give you $250. If you catch a 10 pounder, they'll give you $500. If you catch a 13 pounder, they'll give you $1,000. We're going to match 20 cents on each dollar to Texas Park and Wildlife. And at the end of the year, we've selected 9 lakes. The biggest ShareLunker, that's a Spark customer, out of those 9 lakes is going to win another $2,000.
That's awesome.
They wrote a blank check for Texas Park and Wildlife for Spark customers. And if we can generate the kind of sales I think we can generate for these guys, it'll get bigger. And I think there'll be other companies that'll go, hey, you know, I mean, look, Toyota's figured it out, right? They figured out that if you'll give guys $750, $1,000 per tournament, that's the other side. It's your other left.
Thank you. I do it every time. You think I know by now. I'm like,
you know, if we'll support them, they'll support us. So I'm excited, terrified that it might or might not work. I hope it does, but it's a really, really cool deal. And I mean, and to be honest, I was kind of blown away. So in our world, so we talked about it earlier, right? Bass Cat's going to make 700 boats this year. Blazer may make 200 boats. You know, a lot of the, you know, whoever you guys buy your jigs from, I'll bet you they do less than $1 million a year in revenue. Endemic companies, endemic meaning fishing related companies, don't have budgets like this to support us. Spark Energy, they're publicly traded. They made $92 million in profit last year. They got big pockets. We just got to, and there's a bunch of companies like that. We just got to show them that it's worth the investment.
Yeah. So I think that is awesome. When I watched that video and I was like, wow, that is really, really cool, especially the giving back to the Parks and Recreation.
Yeah.
And you just have to be a customer.
Yep.
And they're
no affinity fee. He goes, we're not going to charge anybody anything. If they're a customer, they're in the pot.
So are their energy prices pretty similar to the other companies that are out there?
They discounted their energy prices for this program. So yeah, it's incredibly competitive.
It's a no-brainer.
Yeah. So what in that world, and not to have a huge conversation about energy, their profit comes in the second year. So in this world, there's a bunch of companies who set up a cheap rate, and then when you renew, it goes through the roof, which happened to me, by the way, with the prior company. They want to create brand loyalty. And if they can create brand loyalty, this gets really profitable for them. So they know what they're doing. They ran the numbers on us, and we got to sign up about 1,000 customers this year for this to work, for financially for it to work for them. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where we are right now, but I think we have every chance in the world of hitting that goal. And if we do, they've already told me if this works, we'll make it bigger.
Well, I tell you what, I'll make a pledge to you. I'm a letter carrier for United States Postal Service, so I'm out on the street every day, and every car or vehicle I see at the gas station with Texas license plates, I will make sure that I go up to them and I'll let them know about this Spark Energy program, just in case. Especially if I see like a BASS sticker on their back glass.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's easy, by the way. It's just sparkbass.com.
And now we know why it takes long to get our mail.
Right.
Yeah, it's not just me; it's everybody. That Amazon. I'm not going to get off on a mailman rant, but I've got.
Oh, let's do it. Come on.
Yeah, right. That Amazon thing it's been nuts this year with the virus and stuff. It's unbelievable how many people have went to online shopping, and it's been blowing up for the last 3-4 years, but this year
it takes weeks to get a tackle warehouse order. They're killing me.
I know, it's crazy. Those should be priority.
They should be priority.
Yeah,
it should be an essential business.
Put that toilet paper in the back and put the tackle warehouse up front.
I got old socks. I don't need that.
So, all right, guys, we've been on here for
2 hours,
almost 2 hours. But so if you got any questions out there before Ken takes off, and I've really enjoyed this, please go ahead and put those out there and give us a thumbs up if you have not. If you're new to the channel, we encourage you to subscribe. And I'm going to say it again, and go check out Ken's fishing channel. It's a really good one. Lots of good stuff on there. A lot of the stuff we talked about tonight, and when you get on there and just kind of start pilfering around, you'll see where a lot of this stuff is coming from. It's just,
my mom hasn't asked why I didn't clean up behind me.
She hasn't been. I think she's no. I haven't seen
Okay,
I figured she'd be have a different name on there.
Sorry, Mom.
So I'm looking over. I got a few questions here. I just want to browse and make sure we've covered everything. So okay, what are you fishing this year as far as tournaments? You got
not much, because I have if you saw the hand me the beer around the monitor a minute ago, my wife is pregnant and due. I know I'm old, but she's due with our second baby boy in April. So, I got about a 6-week no-fly period there. So I really did not commit to fish much, which kind of stinks because the Toyota series this year is Rayburn, Texoma, Rayburn, which would have been the absolute perfect setup for me. But one of them is dead in my no-fly zone period. So I'm going to just sort of potluck some stuff. I'm going to fish the North Texas Bass Champs division. And I'm doing that because I can stay home during the time when we won't be traveling, because we want to have our baby here in Dallas versus in a town of 600 people. So not much. It's going to be the lightest. Well, actually, last year was the lightest tournament season in my life because of COVID, but it'll be a super light tournament series for me this year. And I'm going to, assuming because we've got a 17-month-old, a pregnant wife, and a baby on the way. So we're being super COVID cautious in our home.
Yeah.
But if we can all get vaccinated, I want to fish some tournaments with some guys I've never fished before. I'm having the best time. That's one of the other things I've really enjoyed. Even though we didn't fish in some of these boat reviews, I got to go out with guys that I've known for years that I've never spent time in a boat with. And, spending time in a boat with a guy is a little bit like playing golf with a guy. You get to talk, as opposed to you see him on a weigh-in and you go your separate ways. And I've really, I got to know Phil, the guy in the Bass Cat, better than I'd ever known him before, because we spent 5 hours together. So I'm dating the field, if you will. Just, out hanging out with some guys that I've never really gotten to spend any time in a boat with. So it's been fun.
So are people pretty responsive when you call about, say, hey, I'm trying to do I'm doing this bass boat videos. I know you own a Vexus.
Yeah.
Would you mind if I met you somewhere? Has that been going pretty smooth, as far as people being open to that?
So it's been really interesting. So the first boat I mentioned, I did the Bass Cat Puma hybrid, and I waited to do another bass cat, a more traditional bass cat, till the end, because they really were my guinea pig. And they literally let me have a brand new boat. And I still don't know why they let me do that. You know, my preference has been to look at used boats because, you know, a 3 to 6 month old boat, because I want to see, you know, has there been wear and tear on the boat? Unfortunately, I kind of caught a lot of these boats in the 2021 flip to the new models, and I wanted to look at the newest models. So a lot of them have been newer boats, but they've been, I have been lobbied to look at some boats. The Blazer got pulled here from Little Rock for me to look at. The Gambler will come a long distance for me to look at it. And I've had a lot of really good response from my viewers when I said, hey, I want to look at this. Matter of fact, the Allison I want to look at is from one of my viewers. He bought a 2021 Allison, and I can't wait to drive it. So yeah, it's been really funny. I mean, God bless him, guy turned me loose in a brand new Bullet with a 300R on it and said, just go for it.
Mm.
And
yeah, I would have 2 life vests on. I'm thinking,
yeah. And that boat, I only ran that boat 76, and it had a lot more. It was a real rough day though, but so yeah, everybody's been great, and you know, heck, I got guys wanting me to look at Legends, and I'm like, look, I'm not going to look at boats that aren't made anymore, but I think guys are really interested how their boats stack up to other boats. Mm-hmm. I probably did a smart thing early on by trashing my own boat a little bit, because I kind of showed guys I'm not going to be a homer about this. Mm-hmm. The only thing I'm a homer about is Texas Ranger baseball. Otherwise, I keep lying to myself that they'll be good again someday. Everything else, I'm pretty straightforward about it, and
Raven red lipless crankbaits too.
And red orange, yes.
Yes, red orange.
So everybody's been real cooperative with it, and yeah, it's not been that hard to get a hold of boats. Some of it, you know, like the Vexus, it's been hard to get the right day in that boat, and like the Camus. I mean, I looked at the Camus on a perfectly calm day on Texoma. If it were going to be one of my final boats, I would go drive that boat again, but it's not going to be one of my final boats.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Yeah, you know, you summed it up. Spending a day out on the water with somebody is such a great way to meet and find out who that person is, because it's like the stress kind of melts away as long as you can let all the technology go away, you know, like the phone and the computer and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But you know, you get out there and it's kind of everybody's on the same plane, and you just kind of relax. And I love those days, man, especially with I fish a lot of tournaments as a co-angler. I fish boater and co-angler. It just depends on the tournament if I have time to fish them and stuff. But I've had some really great days on the water with a guy that I just met. You know, I got on the phone with him the night before, and we talked for a little bit, and he said, okay, meet me here at 6 a.m. And we got in the boat and spent 8 hours a day. And, you know, you make a lot of good friends. I still got contacts to most of those boaters that I fish with in the BFLs and stuff. So there's nothing like a time on the water to meet somebody and hang out with somebody. So
some of my best friends are guys who I met because they co-angled in my boat. And by the way, some of my best information I've talked about in these boat reviews came from co-anglers. Because you think about it, I fished out of a Ranger for the last 12 years. I don't have other experience. Mm-hmm. How many boats did you fish out of this year?
A lot.
So, you know, when you're going to go get an XYZ boat, oh crap, I hope this guy can drive, or, oh great, it doesn't matter whether this guy can drive or not.
It's almost, now that you're saying that, I never thought about this, but if you had a little bit of money and you wanted to join, if you wanted to fish maybe 2 or 3 divisions of a BFL in one season, as a co-angler, you're talking, let's just say 2 divisions. So you're talking $1,000 basically. Mm-hmm. Chances are you would get to ride in 6 or let's just say 6 different boat manufacturers styles. And chances are you're going to have Humminbird, Lowrance, and Garmin in the mix. So you could actually go for a test ride in those boats and fish a tournament, have a chance to win some money. That's awesome, because that's when I started watching some of your boat videos. That's the one thing that jumped in my mind is how many different boats I've been in as a co-angler.
Right.
I've been in the Skeeters, been in the Legends, of course, Rangers. Rangers are really popular. I've been in the Bass Cats. I've been in a Bullet. That's why I was smiling when you were talking about that Bullet, because that is hands down the fastest boat I ever been. It scared the crap out of me. We were running like 84 miles an hour. He had a racing motor. He had it all souped up. I think he had a buddy that did work on that, but that sucker was slow out of the hole. But when that nose went down, it just freaking boom, it was gone. And I mean, we were like 30 to 70, just like that. And I'll never forget that boat. But there's the Camus. I got to look at a brand new Camus down at Lake of the Ozarks. I got to get in there and talk to the guy and get his opinion on it and stuff. He was real impressed with that boat. And he was coming out of either a Phoenix or a Ranger, but I've been in several of the Phoenixes. But just as a co-angler, I've got to be in a lot of those boats. And the same way with electronics companies. I mean, I've seen the Lowrance side scan versus the Humminbird side scan, and the Lake Master versus the Navionics or the C-Map and stuff. And so I've got good ideals of seeing how that stuff works in action too. You know, like on Kentucky Lake, a lot of those guys were scanning ledges. So I've got to see what the Lowrance side scan looks like on a shell bar versus the Humminbird side scan looks like on a shell bar, and even Garmin a couple times. You know, I've been in the boat with guys that had the Garmin too, and you really get a feel of the different screens, the different size graphs, how the 10-inch looks versus the 12-inch, and I don't think I've seen a 16-inch yet, but definitely there's a lot of different variables, and you kind of form an opinion based on what you're seeing as a co-angler of what, if you had money and it's your time to upgrade your graphs or your boat, what are you looking for? So
yeah, you've seen more than the vast majority, than 95% of boaters have.
Mm-hmm.
Because all we're ever in is our boat and our team partner's boat.
Right. That's awesome. That's really, really good.
And by the way, you know, to your point a minute ago, so I don't know how much high school fishing y'all are getting up there, but it's really become huge in Texas. And there's some complaints about it because some of the kids don't, you know, the captains don't quite understand the etiquette of bass fishing or don't care. But the one real positive I see out of it is I think a lot of guys are spending 6, 8, 10 hours with their kids when there's no phone, there's no video game other than that video game you're looking at, you know, at your feet. And I think I can't wait till Hollis and his little brother are old enough for me to get to spend that time with them. I mean, just us, just out there having fun or being frustrated together or whatever, getting rained on, you know, whatever. It's an experience that I've always said, you want to know a man, play golf with him or fish with him a day, because you're going to see his best and his worst that same day.
Yeah, definitely. And you can teach those younger kids that etiquette that we've learned. You can pass it on to them.
And how to cuss.
That's right. Once you get to
whether you want to teach them that or not, it's coming out.
Like a buddy of mine said, he said, you know why I coach soccer? And I said, no, why? He said, because it's important for my son to know that it's not just him that I'll yell at.
That's right. It's words of wisdom right there. Good stuff. All right, kid, man. I think we're gonna wrap this up. We've been on here for a couple hours, and man, it has been a pleasure to meet you. I've really
love to do it again. You guys let me know when.
Yeah, we will. We'll maybe here in a couple months. Congratulations on the new baby that's on the way.
Thank you.
And you know, it's funny. It's a little bit different, but I remember a couple of years ago during the spawn, I decided to do this landscaping project, and it was one of those deals where I thought I could knock it out in a week, and it started about mid-April. I decided to get started on it, and just like any other project, you underestimate the time that it's going to take. I don't care what it is; it takes at least 2.5 times. So anyway, I'm in the middle of May, still trying to complete this project, and all I can think about is the spawning fish or the dumb fish that have just moved up, and I'm missing this moving bait bite. You know, this is when everybody is a pro. You know, anybody can go down the bank and catch doing that landscaping project. I finally got it finished up, but that reminded when you talked about how you're going to have to be hanging around the house a little bit more and not fishing quite as much. So yeah, I feel you, but you're doing it for a better reason, for sure.
Yeah, I'm getting another fishing partner.
That's right. That's right. So, all right, Ken, we'll talk to you later, man. Have a good
Thanks,
evening,
guys.
and appreciate it once again.
All right, thanks, guys.
Okay, bye-bye. All right, guys, that was great, man. Lots and lots of stuff going
good
down. Lots
show.
Yeah, great show, man. That if you guys have just got on here and you didn't catch this, go back and listen to the replay tomorrow. We'll have it on later on tonight or tomorrow. Hit the thumbs up again. Subscribe if you have not. Go check out Ken Smith Fishing for sure. A lot of good info on there. Give him a look. Give him a sub because he was nice enough to stay on here for a couple hours and talked about a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of videos on there about the boat stuff we talked about, and you can go back and listen to the replay if you want to get the nitty gritty on this. Lots of good Lipless crankbait details. I'm just kind of recapping what we talked about tonight. We talked a lot about some of the lakes where the lake that the Classic's going to be on, the Red Crest, some Texas stuff, just lots of good stuff. It's definitely worth a listen if you got the time to go back and check it out tomorrow. But next week, we got a great guest next week. I'm really excited about that, about the upcoming week.
I was like, don't let it out.
Don't let it out? You don't want me to say it? You don't want me to say it? Okay. Okay, you're going to want to watch next week's show for too. It's going to be another good one. God, I can't tell. It's not. I want to say it. I want to say it. I'm totally teasing it. But we're gonna have it. Can I tell him he's gonna be in?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. He's gonna be in studio. This person is going to be in studio. You're gonna want to check this out.
We'll throw this out there. He's making a 2.5 hour drive here.
Yeah, he's making a 2.5 hour drive here just to come into the studio and share time with you guys. So it's gonna be well worth it. We're probably gonna have a giveaway. I'm thinking we're going to have a giveaway, and it's going to be something that you're going to want to have.
Yes,
definitely. So, man, you sure I can't tell him?
Man, it's going to be good.
Okay, I won't tell him. I was all ready to start talking about the details and give up the juice and stuff.
Hopefully next week going to be a little bit different setup in here too.
Yeah, we're going to have to push this table forward a little bit and spread it out a little bit. But
and get an AC unit in this place. Jesus.
Yeah,
I'm roasted.
It is a little bit toasty. That's because there's been so much information out here. So, but that's it, man. We will let you guys go. Thanks for staying on here. Hope you enjoyed this, and we will see you next Monday, 7:30 Central. Thanks for anybody that's new on here. The guys that we've been seeing on here, we really appreciate the support.
A couple of them are already jumping on her. They know. Let's get out of here for
yeah, Jay knows. That's right.
All right. See you guys.
All right.